Our hero grabs a massive red tomato and loves how bright it looks. But he's totally bummed when he realizes it's way too sour, so he vows to grow a sweeter batch next. This super cute girl with ears and a tail calls him Mystery Soggy, saying everyone's waiting for him while she carries a basket of big red tomatoes. He looks her way, nods along, and tells her he's coming over right this second. Isagi is super hyped and ready to finally live his best life this time around. Inside the massive castle of Remorse, the hallways are packed with knights in epic armor, and then a man calls out the boy's name. He tells him he's officially kicked out of the court alchemist spot starting right now, and our guy just stares back in total shock, wondering what's even going on. Isagi is totally confused and asks him why he'd even do that, but the guy thinks he's doing a great job as the court alchemist and is actually shocked that Isagi. He explains that a court alchemist's real job is just building magic weapons for the army, and the kid is absolutely shocked to hear it. This guy is complaining that the kid is totally slacking off just to dig in the dirt, and while he stares at his scroll with a bored look, we find out he's actually Garius. The kid refuses to back down, shouting that this isn't some low-level business, while Isagi hides his hand in his sleeve as the alchemy chief watches his every move. The guy pulls out a small bag and insists he check it out, bragging that he uses alchemy to grow his crops. He points to his bags with a wild, angry look, shouting that his seeds can grow even in the middle of a total wasteland. The guy shrugs it off as total trash, saying if they're low on food, they should just take it by force. He rests his chin on his hand and reaches out, thinking he's shaking with pure rage, crushing that bag of seeds in his left hand as hard as he can because he's officially had enough of everything. The Romaris Empire became a massive superpower by crushing everyone in their path. So now, they pour every single person they have into their giant army. He's sick of these trash rules making everyone's lives a total nightmare. He still remembers seeing all those starving kids out on the streets. To save his home, he's gonna... The head of alchemy suddenly stands up and leans over the table, confessing he's been ditching work to farm inside the castle, but since he's finally stopping, Isagi asks if he's getting fired. He's definitely hitting his targets, but because he's just a regular kid from an orphanage, this guy treats him like he's nothing. Isagi still stands by his actions, insisting that alchemy isn't for killing, but for making people happy. Isagi stares down his old boss with pure rage, but Garius just looks back and tells him he's finally free. The guy turns around and gives the kid a totally cold look, telling him that alchemists just need to shut up and follow orders. He gives the guy a dirty look, realizing the boss just treats alchemists like tools, but he keeps it cool and says he'll take the job. Our MC wanders through a ghost town full of empty houses and steps inside a building with a sign for Soggy's workshop. He tosses his jacket by the door, and that same girl is right there to wish Mr. Isagi a good morning. This cute girl with animal ears and a ponytail pops up to ask how his day's going. She's got a huge smile while carrying a wooden tray and a cloth. She's actually part Soggy. Isagi gives her a super sad look as he walks into the room, tossing his jacket over his right arm, totally shocked that she's already there. Mercia's a servant at the court, but she spends her breaks helping out in the workshop, and this guy is totally stuck thinking about their time together. They teamed up here to find a way to grow food in dead soil, but now our hero just slumps into a chair with a heavy sigh, leaving the girl totally confused by his vibe. She can tell something is seriously bothering him and asks what happened with a worried look, but he just goes completely silent. He sadly breaks down the whole truth to her, and Mercy literally screams in shock, wondering how any of this is even possible. She's absolutely fuming and shouts that Mr. Asagi was a hero for the Empire, crushing the paper in her fist and leaning hard on the table because she just can't handle it. He's totally lost why she's freaking out so much, so he puts his hands up to try and chill her out. But Marcia is still fuming and snaps at him to see if he's the one who's actually mad. He keeps his cool and admits he's actually fuming, but honestly, he's just glad she finally knows who he is. He actually tells her it's a good thing, though. Mercy just stares at him, completely shocked. Our hero gives her a real thank you for caring about him so much, since he gives her a big smile and puts his hand on her chest, telling her he's so glad they're friends, and she totally blushes as she says his name. She's super hyped and asks what his next move is, but he just scratches his face looking totally lost, admitting he never thought he'd get fired and has zero plans. He rubs his chin, wondering if the orphanage will be stoked to see him and if he can actually land a job and a place to stay there, while the girl just stares. She turns bright red and crosses her arms, totally stuck on what to do until she gets a sudden idea and nervously asks him to just go to her homeland. He whips his head around in total shock, staring at her like he's completely lost and asking what she even means. Mercy turns beet red and waves her hands frantically, swearing she didn't mean it like that. She explains she's just trying to give him a change of scenery, but her drooping. Isagi frowns and rubs his chin, thinking hard about her idea to head to her homeland for a fresh start. Our MC remembers her home is the Beast Kingdom, picturing a map where 80% of the people are beastmen, and she confirms she's actually from a tiny village right on the border. Hisagi says he's glad she invited him, but he's looking pretty nervous about whether he'll actually be useful until Mercia suddenly jumps right in his face and shouts that She crosses her arms with a serious frown and says that having an alchemist like him on their side changes everything, making him stare at her in total shock as he calls her name. Mercius explains that even though the village has tons of resources, they're actually running out of food every year, making her miss the forests and mountains of her old home. He says she joined his research because she wanted to help everyone by making crops that could grow in even the worst soil. He remembers his promise to send these seeds to Mercia the second they're ready, so he stares at the bag sitting right there on the table. Hisagi realizes he just finished studying this culture and gathered a ton of info, so he covers his mouth and gets super focused while he thinks it over, leaving the girl looking totally confused. He rubs his chin and frowns, trying to figure out how to make this stuff grow on every single piece of land, when he suddenly shouts that he's got it, leaving Mercia looking totally shocked. He snatches the bag off the table, whips his head toward her with a super serious look, and tells her straight up that he's heading to her homeland. Our hero glows as he spreads his arms wide, looking her right in the eyes and saying that maybe they can finally use everything their cultures have built up. He flashes her a grin, planning to take their success global once they have enough food, and she steps closer to thank him with a huge smile of her own. But then her smile totally vanishes. She gets super quiet and nervous and asks if he's actually sure about this, while he just stares back like he's completely lost. She covers her mouth looking totally confused and tells him that with his crazy skills and all the variety he's got, any country would be lucky to have him. But he just gives her a weird look and reminds her that she was the one who invited him. She turns bright red and apologizes for that sudden proposal, covering her mouth and admitting she just got way too caught up in the moment. He tells her it's way better to take a hand from a friend than to just sit there, stuck and useless. So he reaches out to her, totally convinced that if they take control of their own lives, they can actually take down the empire. Isagi puts his hand over his heart with a big grin, telling her that since she's always been there for him and his research, he's finally going to return the favor. He asks if he's really not allowed to do it, and as Mercy starts to tear up, she quickly wipes her eyes with her left hand. Our hero decides he's just gonna... She blushes and says she's quitting too, so he just grins, starts stuffing his gear into a huge bag and tells her he'll see her soon. She's about to walk away while humming a tune, but the guy suddenly realizes what she's saying and stops dead in his tracks, looking at her in total shock. Isagi suddenly bolts out of his workshop and screams for the girl to wait, making her stop in the middle of the street and look back totally confused. He can't believe she's actually quitting to follow him, but Mercia promises she's never going to leave his side. Our hero gets worried and asks if she's really sure about throwing her job away. He thinks a palace gig is a huge deal and the pay is way too good to lose, but she just looks. Mercia blushes and rests her hand on her chin, giving him a sweet smile as she teases him that now he's the one worrying about her for a change. He finally lets out a huge sigh of relief and tells her they should just go together, and she doesn't even hesitate to say yes. A few days later, the crew is heading out of the city gates when a carriage rolls by, and after the girl tells Isagi to stay low and asks if he's good, he gives a chill smile and says they're totally fine since he already packed all the food and water in his magic bag. She grips her massive backpack and looks totally annoyed at this alchemical bag that somehow holds way more than it looks like. Mercia tells him it's going to take a whole month to reach the Beast Kingdom, and even though the trip will be total torture, she says they should try to enjoy it, so he gives the castle one last sad look and agrees. Isagi stares out the round window with a massive grin, her jaw dropping at the view, while the other girl smiles right along with her, and nearby, two guys are just chilling, with one of envy. It's September 12th and 17th, and as they're wandering the city, our hero points out a massive tower standing right in front of them. On September 28th, they set up camp in the countryside and light a small fire, where Mercia sits by the glowing embers as the Asagi hand her a cup of steaming hot liquid. It's October 7th, and they're back on the road in the carriage, where Marcia is desperately trying to wake the boy up until he finally drags his eyes open and sees her silhouette in the dark. She tells him they've finally made it, and Isaki rubs her eyes with her left hand while staring out the window with a super groggy look. His eyes snap open in total shock as he realizes he's finally in Mercia's homeland, looking out at the packed streets of Plumita, where beastmen are everywhere in the kingdom of... The second they get dropped off, Our MC is totally blown away by the massive crowd of beastmen everywhere, and even though they're just on the edge of town, it's super clear they've finally reached the Beast Kingdom as Isagi and Mercia stare at everyone in shock. They spot a massive grinning bullman easily carrying water buckets in his hand and on a shoulder pole, while right behind him, a girl is giving it her all to drag a stubborn. Just a bit further back, a woman is checking out a merchant's shovel, while a guy with rabbit ears holding a rooster cage looks totally shocked to see them. And right next to him, a girl is frantically trying to catch a chicken. Mercia tries to drag him to her house, but he stops her, asking if they should see the village chief first, since he's worried about how they'll react to a random guy. She tells him to relax since the chief is her dad, and as she gets super serious with her hand on her heart, he totally flips out and screams, "Wait, for real?" He tells her she should have said something sooner, but Mercia just grins with her eyes shut and says she kept it a secret to surprise him. The kid is totally freaking out and asking what he should do, while Isagi worries he's about to say they don't even need alchemists, but the girl tells him to just chill because everything is totally fine. Mercia gets dead serious and clenches her fist, warning him that if he says another word, she's gonna lay him out, leaving our main guy totally stunned and wondering if she actually just threatened to deck him. The girl waves Isagi over and leads him straight to this massive house, telling him they've finally made it to her place. Mercy stops before heading in to tell him she's gonna talk to her parents first. He tells her he totally gets it, and then she finally reaches for the door handle. Out of nowhere, a smiling woman jumps out, totally hyped that Mercy is finally back. She shouts that Mercy's home, but the girl just calls her mom and tells her to stop ski. Hisagi walks into Mercy's place and gets the shock of his life. Right there is this super pissed off guy staring him down with the meanest look ever. It doesn't. The guy tells Agi to grab a seat across from him and his wife right next to Mercia, so Isagi thanks him and says he's super sorry for the interruption. Stuttering and acting all nervous, our guy says he's happy to meet them and explains that he's an alchemist named Izagi from the Remuris Empire. Out of nowhere, Mercy's dad cuts him off and screams at him to shut up, leaving the kid totally shook as the man yells that he'd never let his daughter be with some. Our MC shows up totally clueless and asks what's going on, but the village elder just snaps at him again, yelling that Mercia is his precious daughter and he's just some random guy who popped out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, Mercy's mom cuts him off with a big smile and says she actually likes him, making her husband stop yelling and just stare at her in total shock. Our guy is super embarrassed and starts apologizing like crazy, but Mercy's mom is just hyped that she finally brought a man home and assumes they've already got everything figured out. Out of nowhere, Mercia leaps from her chair and catches everyone off guard. Her face turns bright red as she grabs her dress and yells that they've got it all wrong because she just wanted to introduce Isagi as the village's newest resident. Her dad is totally stunned seeing his daughter shaking next to this new guy, while his wife just stands there with a super awkward smile. He blushes a bit, asks for a do-over, and introduces himself as Kelsey, the village chief. The elder asks if he wants to move in, and Isagi gives a big smile and says yes, as long as he can keep doing his alchemy stuff in the village. Mercy's parents are totally speechless and confused. His dad's jaw drops while his mom looks super worried, and Mercy just stares back at them wondering why they're acting so weird. Mercia figures Isagi's parents don't know the first thing about alchemy, and while Isagi is caught off guard, the dad awkwardly scratches his head and admits she's totally right. Everything finally clicks for Isagi. He asks the group if they've ever run into an alchemist before. The girl tells him that alchemists are super hard to find around here. He gives them a big grin and explains that alchemists use magic to control matter, letting them reshape and change the very structure of anything they want. He admits it's tough to beat the original work, but calls it a super useful skill, leaving the girl's parents staring at him in a totally awkward silence. She tells them it's way too hard to explain and figures showing them real alchemy would be faster. And the guy knows she's right. Our hero walks up to Kelsey and asks to borrow the sword on his hip, and once he gets the okay, he starts checking out the blade really close. Kelsey shows off his new dagger, bragging about the high-quality manatee inside, but when the guy tells him there's actually zero manatee in the blade, Kelsey gets heated and demands to. Our hero explains that alchemists can see the true form of any material, and he quickly spots that this metal is just some low-grade nomatite that looks a lot like manatite. She imagines a shady merchant selling fake magic gear, and the guy gets super mad, shouting that it costs 20 silver coins. He pulls off his gloves, grips the sword, and confidently says everything's fine because he's going to turn it into a real manatite dagger. Mercy's mom is totally caught off guard and asks him again, while his dad is freaking out that he can turn a sword into something super expensive and wants to know how he pulls it off. He grabs the sword and a magic circle pops up as the blade starts glowing, leaving the girl's parents totally stunned. He realizes he's got to change the dagger's shape and weight first, so he focuses his magic to warp and mold the metal in a bunch of different ways. With a huge, honest smile, our MC hands over the magic-boosted dagger to his friend's parents and tells them they're all set. The guy grabs the blade and stares in total shock, asking if it's really made of manatite. So Isagi tells him to just pump some magic into it to see for his shear. Kelsey flows her magic into the weapon, and her jaw drops in total shock while the guy just stares at the dagger like he can't believe his eyes. He spots a target on the wall right behind the main character and instantly hurls his new weapon at it with everything he's got, shouting that he just wants to test it out. The dagger hits the target, but it's so crazy powerful that it rips right through and blasts a hole in the wall, leaving the elder totally shocked when he sees it stuck in the ground outside. Kelsey blushes and says it's all good, but then his wife grabs his shoulder from behind with a super fake smile and asks what he thinks he's doing. The guy looks at his wife and is totally shaking, stuttering that he didn't realize he was actually that strong, but she just gives him a death stare and cracks her knuckles, telling him to stop making excuses while Kelsey begs for mercy. Our main guy is totally freaked out and has no idea what's going on. He says sorry to everyone and admits he really should have given them a heads up first. There. A bit later, the wall is totally fixed and looks just like a fresh target. The girl calls it super cool, and after our guy thanks her, he uses his magic to rip a chunk of wood. He says alchemists can totally pull this off and his biggest dream is to farm using alchemy, but the man gets dead serious and tells him the ground is completely barren and hopeless. Isagi looks totally shocked, but admits he already knows, explaining that this is exactly why the forests and mountains are being stripped bare, leaving the man super confused as to why Isagi even bothered. Our hero looks the chief right in the eye, slams his hand over his heart, and excitedly shouts that he's there to use alchemy to fix their food problem for good. Kelsey's totally stumped, giving him a super serious look as the boy explains that Mercia told him all about the village's struggles, and now he's planning to use alchemy-boosted seeds to turn their dead soil into a farming paradise. Isagi tells him he wants to save people from starving, even if it's just one person. And while the guy thinks that over, Mercia suddenly stands up and warns that if they don't, she looks her parents right in the eye and shouts that they have to let her use Lord Isagi's alchemy to start farming and save the village's future. Kelsey closes her eyes with a tiny smile, and even though the guy isn't totally sure, he thinks he's got a real shot, so the elder looks at his happy wife and finally gives him the green light. Our main guy is totally stunned with his jaw on the floor, while Mercius just smiles happily beside him as they both give a huge thanks to his parents. The guy watches his wife write on a scroll and says Isagi needs his own spot, so they decide to give him a massive estate before she hands the scroll to her daughter. She tells Mercier to take his Segi to an empty house, grabs the scroll, and then flashes a big smile as she tells the guy to follow her. The palace felt like a total cage, but out here he's finally free to do whatever he wants. As Mercia and Isagi walk down the street, a girl is spying on them. Our hero and the girl head past the edge of town and into the woods, while he dreams about using his alchemy to turn this village into a total paradise. They're trekking through the woods when the girl points out his new home, and as he stares ahead, he's super hyped to start his brand new life right here. Right in front of the boy and girl is this tiny beat-up house with half the roof missing, and they just stare at it, totally confused. Mercia looks from the paper to the building with a shocked frown, while Sagi is totally lost and asks if this is actually his new home. She calls the house a total dump, while giving off some seriously creepy vibes, crushing a paper in her fist because she's so mad that Mr. Asagi is being forced to live in such a wreck. Our guy is standing right behind her, totally weirded out and honestly a bit freaked out, when he suddenly remembers the guy saying this house was super old and that Kelsey had already warned him. Mercia spins around and screams that there's no way she's letting this happen, clenching her fists as she prepares to storm off and spill the beans. But Isagi, she spins around and tells him he's totally wrong, looking super serious with her eyebrows scrunched up, but she's actually blushing a bit as she stares him down. Isagi balls up his left fist and shouts that if a house is falling apart, you're better off just rebuilding it, telling her that's exactly how an alchemist thinks. He flashes a big smile and says he's always wanted to build a dream house, making her ask him again in total shock. Back when our main guy was a court alchemist, everyone treated him like total garbage just because he was an orphan, which is probably why his workshop was basically just a giant, empty warehouse. He looks at the house with a big smile and says he's going to build something he actually loves, while the girl drops her hands and agrees, even though she sounds pretty sad about it. One line out. The input is one paragraph. I will output one sentence/line. Our hero presses his gloved hand against the wood, wondering if this beat-up house is actually... He rips off his gloves, ready to level this house first, and with a determined smirk, he fires a steady blast of magic straight at the old building. A magic circle glows on his palm as he targets the tree, warping the wood until it starts cracking and shaking all over the place. Finally, the entire building just crumbles into a pile of sticks. The girl behind him is just watching the whole thing happen. He wipes the sweat off his forehead and actually starts smiling. Mercia swings a few boards over her shoulder with a grin, telling him she's going to get the rest of this mess cleared out. He thanks her, sounding totally shocked, but he's low-key confused about how heavy those boards are as he drops down to dig through his bag. He explains he's got to clear out the weeds to get the land ready. Then he feels something in his bag, says, "This is it," and pulls out a special hybrid herbicide. Isagi uses his alchemy to totally transform the stuff he made. He cranks the power up to the max so it works way faster. Now, he starts spraying the whole mixture all over his yard. He's super pumped and tells Mercia everything's fine, shouting that it's time to start building the house, while she just stares at him and wipes her tired face with her left hand. He pulls a massive wooden stick out of his magic bag and stares at it with a frown. Then the girl next to him reaches in and yanks out a second one. She screams his name in total shock as Isagi collapses under the heavy stick, but they finally grab the antwood he snatched from that plant monster. He touches the tree, and a magic circle glows around his hand as he uses alchemy to make the wood super tough, while Isagi uses levitation magic to make a bunch of sticks float into the. He locks his eyes on the wood and waves his hands, sending the logs flying to start building the foundation of his ultimate dream house. The girl right next to him is totally stunned, her jaw dropping in shock, while he realizes that absolutely nobody can hold him back anymore. He's totally locked in as he uses his magic to keep building his dream house, putting up the walls and windows before finally starting on the roof. He's already got the perfect plan in his head and starts bringing it to life with a huge smile. He's already finished making the doors. Now all he has to do is put the rest. Isagi is super hyped that everything's finally ready, throwing his arms out wide to show off his sick new house while his girlfriend stands nearby taking it all in. He shades his eyes with his right hand to get a better look at the building, while resting his left hand on his hip, and the girl crosses her arms, totally blown away by how awesome it looks. They kick off their shoes and step into his new place. And while he nervously asks if he went overboard, she's just standing there blushing and totally blown away by how cool it is. Mercy flashes a huge grin and tells him she finally gets his vision for the dream house, and he just beams while watching her check out the kitchen tables. He leads her up the stairs to show off the second floor, and she's totally shocked when they even find a bathroom in his new place. Our MC plans to set up a real office later, so Isagi asks the girl for help moving furniture, and Mercia just smiles and tells him she's totally got his back. Our guy pulls a single chair out of his bag and realizes that's literally all they have. So he sighs and plops it by the table, complaining that they basically brought zero furniture. The girl smiles and says they're out of luck because that warehouse is just too small, and the guy totally agrees as he remembers how messy his old paper-filled office used to be. Mercy's ears suddenly twitch at the sound of a voice calling her name, and when she rushes outside, she's totally shocked to find her own mom standing there. The woman's jaw drops and she covers her mouth in shock, asking her daughter if a house this amazing was really in their village the whole time. Mercia explains he used alchemy to totally revamp the house and make it super cozy, leaving her mom shocked and thinking alchemy is the coolest thing ever. Feeling super awkward, he scratches his head and apologizes for changing everything on his own, but she just smiles and waves her hands to let him know it's all good. She says sorry for dropping by unannounced and offers to help him clean the place up, but she gets super embarrassed when she realizes there's actually nothing left for her to do. He tells her he's stoked she cares so much, so she flashes a smile and asks for a tour, and he just grins back and tells her to come on in. Mercy's mom is totally blown away when she walks into the house he built, loving the smooth table and how huge the kitchen is. The daughter watches her peacefully while our main guy stays quiet, but then he suddenly points to the kitchen shelf behind her and says it's way too high for her, making her spin around in total shock. Mercia balances on her tiptoes and reaches for the shelf with a super serious face, totally sure she can grab it if she just stretches a bit more. The guy behind her is totally lost and threatens to cut her down to size, summoning a glowing magic circle to use his alchemy while she quickly reaches for the door handle. She asks if it looks amazing and says once all the gear is out, this kitchen will look way better than theirs, while the girls nearby get a big idea, and Asagi just scratches her head feeling totally. Mercia suddenly shouts to her mom and begs with her hands together, asking if they have any extra furniture or old stuff they can move over right now. A bit later, Mercia stands in the middle of the decked-out kitchen with her hands on her hips, saying it's super cozy while the guy just stares at her with his mouth wide open. With a huge spark in his eyes, our hero tells her how awesome this is and thanks her for making the place feel like a real home, while she just shyly looks away and says she's glad he likes it. Marcia looks around the room and realizes the walls are way too bare, so she decides she needs to hang some stuff up and find a cool vase for the table. He's looking at her in total shock, but she just tilts her head with a big smile and asks if he wants to grab some dinner for now. She drops a huge pot onto the table as Versha explains their mom hooked them up with a delicious meal, and the guy totally remembers her. She pops the lid off the cauldron with a huge grin, and our guy's jaw drops as his eyes go wide, shouting that the food looks absolutely fire. He realizes it's milk soup and thinks it's amazing. So when she starts apologizing for the simple meal, Isagi just smiles and tells her it's exactly what he was craving. Mercier serves up a bowl of sienna soup, a creamy blend of mountain herbs and mushrooms, and pairs it with some bread pulled straight from the magic bag. The main guy grins as he grabs a spoon, ready to dig into the milk soup. The girl's still standing behind him, wishing him a good meal. Isagi spins around, totally confused looking at her. Isagi looks over and asks her to grab a bite, making Mercia blush so hard that her tail literally starts smoking. She spins away and yells that she's just a servant who isn't allowed to eat with him, but he just stares at her totally confused and explains that they're finally out of the castle, so nobody is going to get her in trouble. Her eyes go wide with total shock as she asks if she can really join, and he just turns and invites her to eat with him. She pulls her hands in and tilts her head, blushing like crazy as she thanks him for letting her tag along. Mercia and Isagi sit down for some milk soup and bread, and Isagi can't help but laugh because it feels so weird having her sitting right across from him. Covered in paint, she admits she feels the exact same way and can't even relax unless he's there. But he just says that makes sense and tells her she should probably just hide those feelings. He thanks her again for the meal, she gives him a nod, and he blows on a spoonful of that hot milk soup before finally taking a bite. Isagi's eyes go wide as she shouts about how amazing it tastes, while the guy explains that the sweet, milky flavor just explodes in your mouth. He points at the weird leaf on his spoon and asks Mercia what it is. She tells him it's called crick cook grass. It grows all over the forest nearby. He notices the stem is super crunchy and the leaves are soft, figuring this grass would taste awesome whether it's boiled or fried. He's totally focused on how the mushrooms and salty bacon mix with the sweet milk, visualizing every single ingredient in his head. He happily chomps on a piece of bread and dunks it in the milk soup, thinking about how it's soaked up all that flavor to become super soft and easy to eat. She smiles with relief watching him inhale his food, and he finally taps out with a totally clean plate, saying he's completely stuffed. Mercia's stoked he liked the food, so she clears the table and heads off to do the dishes with a big smile. He tells her to stop and says he'll handle the cleaning himself, thinking she should just head home since she finally made it back to her country after being away for so long. She holds up a gross dish with a totally serious face and says she's staying, leaving him completely shocked as he asks if she really wants to spend the night there. She straight up tells him she's moving in to serve him, leans right across the table to look him in the eye, and he's so caught off guard that his whole face turns bright red. He excitedly tells her to wait, holding his hands out to keep things chill, and asks if she realizes they aren't at the palace anymore and he's not an alchemist. Mercy uncrosses her arms and tells him straight up she's ready to serve him for as long as he wants. And since she's not budging, our hero is left standing there with his jaw on the floor. Isagi scrambles for an excuse to win her over, awkwardly blurting out that he still needs to build her a bedroom and it's just not happening today. She tells him she's already moved all her gear into an empty room on the second floor. She points right at her bags that are already sitting there. Our MC says he keeps awkwardly trying to show his girl some love, but Mercia just gives him a sad look and asks if she can be the one to do it instead. He lets out a tired sigh and finally gives in, telling her that he'd actually love the help, and she gets so hyped she asks if he's for real. Isagi looks pretty stressed and tells her she's got to talk to her parents before they totally freak out, especially Kelsey. But then he remembers that creepy village chief screaming that he'd never let this happen, leaving the girl completely stuck. She's shaking as she tells him her mom gave her the okay, and after a second of total confusion, it finally clicks for him. Just down the road from the main character's house, night has already settled over the village and the elder is absolutely losing it, screaming his daughter's name at the top of his lungs. He squeezes his fist in a total rage and screams for her to get home, yelling that he'll never let her live with Isagi, which makes the guy die of embarrassment while the next day rolls around, and she's already knocking on the door of the house he just built using his alchemy. He looks at her totally worried and says good morning, asking if she finally talked things out with Kelsey. But she just stays silent and clutches her dress with her ears drooping low. Mercier's pretty bummed because her dad said no, meaning she has to commute every single morning to help him out, but our guy totally understands. She's begging for forgiveness with a super sad voice, and since Isagi sees her as his own kid, he totally gets it. But then he remembers the village chief losing his mind in Clenham. He thinks they finally had a real talk, and seeing his girlfriend looking so down, he tells her that just having her there is more than enough. She spins around with a super sad face, rushes over to him, and yells that she's going to convince her dad to let her stay and work there, clutching her chest and begging for just a little more time while he stands there totally shocked. Isagi tells her she doesn't need to try so hard because fighting would just be sad, so he holds his hands up to keep the peace, while secretly getting all shy thinking about how nervous he'd be if they actually moved in together. Mercia is still trying to argue with him. The guy just scratches his head looking totally confused and tosses his hand back. Another girl with animal ears is hiding in the bushes, watching the whole scene. She whips around in total shock to see who called her name, while Isaki ducks down and peeks from behind her, wondering who this random stranger could be. A super cute girl with adorable ears suddenly pops up right in front of them. She holds one hand out, tucks the other close, and starts sprinting their way. She's actually glowing with joy. The girl's jaw hits the floor when she sees her old friend, and Mercier nervously calls out her name, Naya. She sprints over and grabs her hands, shouting that she heard she was finally back and just had to see her. While Mercia smiles and says it's been way too long as our main character watches. Naya keeps holding Mercier's hands and asking why she's back so suddenly, but just as Mercier starts to explain, Naya spots the guy and looks totally stunned. She's just staring at him with her mouth wide open, and while he reaches out feeling totally awkward, Nay suddenly has a massive realization and shouts that she finally gets it. With a sneaky grin, the girl blushes and says she brought her husband, making Mercia turn bright red and wave her hands like crazy to deny. They finally fill Nay in on everything, and Isagi explains he's an alchemist who wants to make the village rich, which she thinks is super cool. Nay just smiles and closes his eyes, saying the guy seems like a solid dude. Then the girl says hi and reaches out for a handshake while the guy just stares in total shock. The girl with the ears introduces herself as Nia, and with a huge blush and a wink, she reveals she's actually Mercy's childhood friend. She grins and grabs the alchemist's hand, shaking it like crazy to say hi, while the guy just stands there totally confused, and Mercia watches the whole thing with pure salt in her. He stares at his new friend with his jaw dropped, totally blown away by how kind she's being to a regular human like him. Naya leans in with a smug look and asks Mercia if she's the one who invited him, making Mercia turn bright red as she admits it and asks what the big deal is. The guy is totally shocked watching Mercia look lost and Naya act super awkward. And even though he thought he knew all her secrets, the way her face just changed proves they're actually way closer. He watches the girls nearby and really wishes he had a best friend like that, while Mercia is totally blushing at what her friends just said. NEA bolts away, shouting that she's got to get moving. She wishes Isagi the best of luck with his farm. She gives them a big wave goodbye. Mercia and Isagi. Mercy's totally blushing as she fidgets with her dress, apologizing for her loud friend, but our guy just smiles and tells her he's actually super glad she reached out to them. After a bit, our hero tells his girl it's time to get to work, and while she fixes her hair in total shock, he explains he needs to see if their crops will actually grow. Our guy rubs his chin, thinking back to how he cleared all those weeds while building his house yesterday, and now he knows it's finally time to start plowing the field. He jumps back in total shock and looks over his shoulder. Isagi points out a rock in the way. He decides he's going to use it as crafting material, and the girl just stands there quietly. Isagi puts his hand on the boulder to scan what it's made of. A glowing magic circle pops up around his palm, and he uses his powers to mold the rock until it starts looking. Suddenly, a massive stone golem towers over the duo, and while our hero is hyped that he actually pulled it off, Mercia is just standing there with her jaw on the floor. Isagi stares at the magic stone in his hands, knowing it's the power source he needs, and finally slams it right into his chest. Isagi pumps his fist and shouts that the golem is finally finished as its eyes suddenly flare to life with a bright light. He orders it to move, and the massive thing actually listens. He cups his hands and shouts to make sure the golem hears him, and the big guy gets right to work plowing the field with two massive hoes. Misagi shades his eyes to get a better look at his work, hyped that the magic is flowing perfectly, while the girl next to him smiles and says she totally expected his golem to be this awesome. She says she's going to spray that weed killer all over the place. Suddenly, the village chief's voice pops out from behind some bushes. He shouts the guy's name and asks what. She's still so mad she won't even look back at him. So our MC turns to the village chief, who's completely losing it over the golem, and catches him totally off guard by calling him by his name. Isagi explains that this golem was built with alchemy just to help out in the fields. He tells the guy it's totally harmless and there's no reason to freak out. The man crosses. The guy rubs his chin and asks if the land can actually grow crops, leaving the kid totally stunned while the golem keeps plowing away behind them. He grins, saying the soil is just like the Empire's, so everything should grow fine. But as Isagi looks at the seeds, he admits he's honestly just taking a... The guy looks totally confused and turns away, saying it's awesome if it's actually true, while his daughter is right behind him spraying weed killer on the plants. He gets super awkward when he realizes Mercia is totally ignoring Kelsey, which means she's actually livid, but she just keeps doing her own thing and acting like her dad isn't even there. He pulls a bag out of his pack, feeling the awkward tension in the air, and tells the village chief he's about to start planting if he wants to come check it out. Our hero grins and says if everything goes right, they can start harvesting immediately. He's clutching this massive bag in his hands. The Beastman village elder just gives him a super confused look. He keeps telling himself he'll be able to harvest everything instantly, so he starts dumping out a bag of special fertilizer made with alchemy. He explains it's just the Empire's basic fertilizer, but instead of changing how it works, he personally packed it with extra nutrients, leaving the guy completely stunned. She realizes her dad is totally clueless and stays quiet, so Mercier finally explains to Kelsey that it's basically magic fertilizer made with alchemy to fix the dead soil, leaving him looking at her in total shock. The guy looks super confused but says he gets it. Our hero finally catches his breath while watching the dad and daughter. The girl tells Isagi she's sorry for making him worry. He just looks. He grins and tells her that even though they butt heads, they're still tight because family is everything. And Mercia totally agrees with her dad as he smiles back at her. Drafting. He quickly switches topics and tells them to start spreading the fertilizer. The golem is already done and is just chilling nearby. Standing by her dad, the girl totally agrees. They get straight to work, with the girl dumping out her bag while the golem grabs a hoe. And the MC explains that the big guy is going to mix all that fertilizer into the soil before using a shovel to prep the garden beds. The kid explains they're planting seeds in the prepped dirt, and the chief asks Soggy if it's finally time to mix in the fertilizer. Our hero explains that while that's usually true, his special fertilizer rots stuff so fast he doesn't even have to mix it, and the guy is absolutely losing his mind over it. She shuts her eyes and coolly says this is a total breeze for Isagi, making the guy behind her look super nervous while Isagi digs through his bag, realizing the stakes just got way higher. He pulls a bag out of his pack and says they're starting with crops that can survive even in this wasteland, and when he opens it up, it's full of specially bred potatoes. He leans over the garden beds he just prepped, dropping the seed potatoes into the holes and burying them under the dirt with his hoe. The kid grabs a bucket of water, totally sure that if he waters it, it'll grow and be ready to harvest. Isagi splashes the water right into the holes, and the guy stands his ground and nervously tells the kid he can't just grow up instantly, leaving the boy staring at the chief in total shock. He says potatoes usually take a few months to grow, but suddenly, plants start bursting out of the holes right under his feet, and he's totally shocked by how fast they're actually shooting up. In a total flash, the whole field is covered in perfect potatoes, leaving the guy completely stunned with his jaw on the floor while the girl just smiles at their success. The potatoes are finally ripe and ready to be picked. Our hero holds an empty bucket and grins, feeling super proud of his hard work. The guy standing behind him is totally losing it, completely shocked. The guy turns around and says that since the leaves are yellow, it's finally time to harvest, leaving Kelsey totally stunned by what he's hearing. Our hero grabs a bush and yanks it with all his strength, looking a bit confused as he asks what's up, while Mercia and her dad watch him with total hope. He finally pulls it off, giving it one last huge tug to rip the whole bush and the potato out of the dirt. And Isagi just grins under the light at his big win. He shouts with pure joy that it's a total success. He holds up a vegetable with one hand on his hip, looking proud. He admits he was confident, but he's still... The man grabs another potato plant and yells that he can't believe they're already harvesting them on the same day, while the other guy just stares at him. He says he's totally right to be shocked and tells them to just taste it. The girl thinks they should do a quick sauté, and Isagi says the weather is so nice they should just cook everything outside. They get the table ready while the girl starts slicing up potatoes, And as the guys sit down, that one dude pulls something out of his bag again. The village chief asks Izzy about the weird gadget with a magic circle on it, and when Izzy explains it's a device that makes fire, Kelsey repeats him in total shock. He twists the round dial on the side of the device, and suddenly a glow pops up on the magic circle as he explains that pressing it like this is how you spark a fire. The man's jaw hits the floor as fire pops out of nowhere, while the other guy just calmly explains that you can control the flames however you want by moving the lever. The guy looks totally stunned as he throws his arms out, staring at the gadget on the table and shouting that while he knew the city had cool stuff, a tool that makes fire this easily is just straight up insane. Isagi just stands there looking totally chill while everyone else is losing it. Then the village elder asks him straight up if he's the one who did it, as the fire keeps roaring in the background. Grinning ear to ear, the kid tells the chief that making magic gear is just what alchemists do, leaving the old man totally blown away. She starts frying up the potatoes and cranks the heat, but then she realizes she needs to add some oil and keep it at a steady medium. She waits for that perfect golden crust to flip them again, and Mercia is all smiles as she tosses those potatoes high into the air with a flick of the pan. She pops the lid on the pan while her dad and the protagonist hover over her, totally starving, with Kelsey clutching her silverware and Isagi holding out an empty plate, ready to dig in. She shuts her eyes and gives them a big happy grin. Mercia decides to let it simmer on low for about 4 minutes. Then she starts serving up the portions. She brings out a tray with a massive grin, shouting that dinner is finally served. The potato sauté is finished and already waiting on the table for them to dig in. The guy's mouth is watering like crazy just looking at the food. He even starts to cry a little when he realizes his daughter was the one who cooked it. The girl says she only used oil. He stabs a piece of potato and takes a bite, but his eyes go wide the second he starts chewing, and even the girl starts blushing after she tries the same dish. Our hero flashes a huge grin and says it tastes amazing while he keeps munching on that potato sauté, and the girl sitting across from him totally agrees that the flavor is on point. The village chief is totally shocked by the dish, and after one bite, he admits these potatoes taste way better than anything they grow back home. The man says he's suddenly overflowing with power as he pumps his left fist, while the other guy watches in shock, realizing the beast man's senses have reached a whole new level. Looking totally chill, our hero explains this potato is actually a power-up that boosts your energy, and the guy is losing his mind that something like this is even possible. Isaki tries to talk some sense into him, but the guy totally ignores it. He just keeps devouring that awesome meal like there's no tomorrow. Pretty soon, there isn't a... Kelsey thinks it over and asks if his alchemy-boosted plants can actually grow in this village, and he tells her they definitely will. He slams his hand against his chest and promises to make the impossible happen because it's his job, leaving the other guy totally stunned and speechless. Isagi says he's going to expand his farm and plant all kinds of upgraded seeds, so he's always got a ton of different food ready to go. Kelsey gives a peaceful smile knowing he's got the power to make this land thrive again, and the man shouts in total agreement, resting a hand on his hip and telling Kelsey The guy gives him a massive, heartfelt thank you and says he'll take it one step at a time, but by the next day he's already out there planting tomatoes and carrots in the other fields. His house is totally surrounded by plants now, and the number of fields has grown like crazy. A boy and girl are standing right next to a golem, and Isagi looks pretty embarrassed as Our guy shades his eyes from the crazy heat and looks way out there thinking about how he used to farm massive gardens back at the palace. Isagi got way too hyped with all that extra space and totally overdid it. So now he's completely wiped out as he yanks up another potato bush, huffing and puffing. He wipes under the pole and lets out a massive sigh, wondering how he's going to handle all this loot, until he remembers he can just stuff it into his magic bag. She walks up looking totally confused with a massive bag of crops, but Isagi warns her they're so short-staffed they won't even finish half the harvest before the season. Mercia asks if he can make another golem, but he just gives a shy smile and admits he's totally out of magic stones. Suddenly, she puts her hand over her heart and excitedly suggests asking her parents for help because Mercia is totally sure they'll come through for them. Our MC is told to hang tight for a bit, so the girl agrees they'll just stick with the golem for now, while he puts a hand on his hip, stretches out, and suddenly, a girl's voice calls out, totally confused about what's going on, and when he looks over, he sees Nia standing right there. Soaking wet, he just stares. Her eyes pop out in total shock as she covers her mouth, saying their village has never had a field this huge. He pulls off his hat and tells them that they used alchemy to grow everything just yesterday. The girl is totally shocked because it's only been 2 days since he arrived, and she can't believe anything is actually growing in this dirt, let alone that it's already time to harvest. Our hero just grins and says it's all thanks to alchemy, making the girl so mad she squeezes her eyes shut and screams that he uses that same excuse for literally everything. Out of nowhere, a voice calls out from the side, backing up Asagi's story and even using the girl's name. The boy looks over, totally confused, but when he turns around, leaning on his tool, this guy swears he saw it with his own eyes. Asagi's special crops are actually growing in their village, and his smiling wife and daughter are right. Nia's eyes sparkle and she starts blushing, clenching her fists with a huge smile as she says that if her uncle says it's true, then it must be, because she thinks he's just the coolest. She turns to him with a massive smile, totally pumped, because she thinks it's finally time to start harvesting. He's a bit awkward after her crazy outburst, but he just gives a small smile and admits he definitely went overboard with the sowing. The guy is totally shocked that the field grew this much in just one day. So Asagi just scratches his head and gives a sincere apology, admitting he got way too hyped and totally overdid. Kelsey's hyped that their starving village finally has a massive harvest, and the elder just smiles and tells him everything is totally fine. His wife smiles back and tells him the village has never seen a harvest this massive. She admits she's actually getting pretty hyped about it. Nia jumps in and says she's going to help. Everyone's telling him it's time to get to work, so Mercia and her mom start grabbing pumpkins with big smiles, while Kelsey slices up cabbage and the stone golem helps our Warren. After a bit, a bunch of baskets stuffed with eggplants and mother-in-law veggies are all lined up, and Yusogi wipes her forehead while letting out a huge, tired sigh. Suddenly, Nia pops out of the bushes and calls his name, holding up a tomato and pointing at it with a big smile as she asks if she can try it. He just smiles back and tells her she can definitely try, making her shout out loud with total excitement. The girl with the ears takes a huge bite of the tomato and looks totally obsessed, blushing and holding her face because it tastes so good she's squinting with joy. She excitedly asks what she's eating and says it tastes amazing. Our guy is totally stoked that she likes it so much. Naya even points out that these are way better than any normal tomatoes. Isagi explains that these tomatoes grow crazy fast and are super sweet, making the girl freak out over how cool it is while Mercia watches from the bushes looking totally annoyed. She looks totally miserable and says it looks like they're having a blast. So you grab a tomato and look her way while the other guy freezes in shock with a half-eaten tomato in his hand. Mercia grabs another tomato and calmly says she's going to try it too. So our guy happily lets her, and she takes a big, satisfied bite. Out of nowhere, Naya rushes over to help her stand, and the girl is so shocked by the sudden kindness that she covers her mouth while Mercier just stands there looking totally confused. Niall gives her friend a super sly smirk. Mercy's face gets so red it looks like her head is about to literally start smoking. She glares at her friend and screams her name in. The girl screams for Naya to wait, and finally catches up as she tries to bolt, yelling about how mad she is, while Isagi just watches from the side picking out a tomato with a smirk. 3 days later, the whole squad, Nea, Mercia, the chief, and his wife, are hanging out in the field by Isagi's house as he thanks them for helping him wrap up the harvest. Kelsey asks what he's doing with all that loot, and the boy just grins while holding his bag, saying he's giving it to the villagers because if he keeps it in the magic bag, it'll just get totally clogged up. Mercia's mom holds up a finger and suggests throwing a massive party, making our hero do a double take as he asks if she's actually for real. She flashes a huge grin and suggests throwing a massive feast with your harvest, thinking it's the perfect way for everyone to get to know you so you can all finally get along. Isagi hesitates because setting up a huge banquet sounds like a total drag, but as he rubs his chin and remembers those fancy palace parties, Mercy suddenly calls his name. She tells him that even though it's called a banquet, it's actually a super chill party where they just set up tables in the town square, and he's totally on board with the plan. The chief starts yelling for everyone to get ready for a massive feast tonight, and while our hero is hyped at first, he's totally shocked that the party is happening so soon. A bit later, he asks if she's ready and tells her they gotta rush to the central square, but while he's low-key stressing about the plan, Mercia has... Asagi tells her he's just a human who literally just got there, and he's totally stressing out as he asks if anyone is even going to show up to his big party. She tells him the big feast is today and everyone's already gathering, leaving our hero totally stunned as he looks out at the square. Marcia turns to him and says everyone is definitely showing up because it's been way too long since they had a massive feast like this. Isagi is totally shocked to see a massive crowd of people trailing right behind the girl. Even little kids are out there running around and having a blast in the streets. Our guy can. Suddenly, Mercy's mom yells from outside, calling Soggy by name to come help her start dinner, and he's totally down to grab the ingredients for her. He dumps a massive pile of eggplants, tomatoes, onions, pumpkins, and carrots straight out of his magic bag, and the woman is totally shocked to see so much food. The chief's wife is hyped because they haven't had this much fresh food in forever, and while she plans the feast, our hero just smiles at the happy crowd. The whole beast tribe was super busy getting everything ready for the big festival. Everyone had their own job to do to make sure things went perfectly. Mercia, Nia, and the rest. Once all the ingredients were tossed into the cauldron, Isagi started blasting the food with his alchemy powers. Everyone in Pomania was whispering and acting super nervous, but once the fire was lit, the food in the cauldron finally started cooking. As the beast girls kept a close eye on the pot and tossed in more ingredients, Isagi watched with a huge smile, totally fascinated by how the whole meal was coming together. Finally, the food was all set, and as the whole village crowded the tables to grab a plate, Mercy's dad, Kelsey, shouted over to Asagi while the chief stood tall. The village chief called Isagi up to the stage for a second, and he actually went along with it. Kelsey thanked everyone for showing up and explained that an epic saga was the only reason their starving village finally had a massive feast. Asagi's face turned bright red because he was caught totally off guard by being introduced to the whole village so suddenly. Isagi stood there totally frozen after that surprise intro, but he quickly shook it off and decided to give a big welcome speech. Asagi finally caught his breath and introduced himself with a shaky voice, telling everyone he was an alchemist who just got to town, and the villagers just smiled because he was being so shy. The boy told everyone there was still a ton of food left and they could eat as much as they wanted, while Naya and Marcia grinned watching Asagi totally crush it on stage. After that wild introduction, the village chief told everyone to welcome their new neighbor Izagi with a toast, raising his wooden mug high in the air. The whole village lifted their mugs and cheered with massive smiles. They let out a giant roar to welcome the boy as one of their own. Everyone chugged their drinks to the bottom to celebrate the festival. Palminia village was totally popping off with energy. Families were all crowded around huge party tables ready to celebrate. Everyone was hyped for the massive feast because they hadn't eaten this well in forever. Our guy walks past all the party tables and realizes there isn't a single empty chair left. Every single spot is totally packed. Everyone in town is busy stuffing their faces with some amazing food. Out of nowhere, someone shouts his name from across the room. It's Mercy, who's already chilling at the party table. She waves Isagi over, pointing at an empty chair, right? Isagi walked up to the table and Mercia told him she'd already grabbed him a plate, so he thanked her for having his back. A plate of veggie-filled pot tofu was already sitting there waiting for him. It's a super thick, hearty soup packed with beef and fresh vegetables. Just looking at it made Isagi's. He scooped a big portion right into his bowl of pot tofu. Isagi looked at the dish like it was a total masterpiece. Marcia felt so proud seeing him stare at it like that. And he took a bite and just stared at his empty spoon, totally hyped. This patofo with veggies was straight up fire. The sweet carrots and onions mixed perfectly with that spicy kick of black sod. Isagi's mind was blown by all the flavors, from the savory sausages to the mushrooms and potatoes. Mercia just stood there grinning while she watched him go to town on that plate of. Naya was totally obsessed with the vegetable soup, telling everyone it was the best thing she'd tasted in forever as she finished every single bite. They were so broke they were literally eating veggie scraps just to survive, and while Naya knew Mercia was right, she was just hyped to see a real feast on the table, but with a totally empty look, he told them the feast would eventually end and they'd be back to eating scraps, leaving the villagers completely shook. Nobody wanted to hear about the food running out while they were partying, but that villager was dead serious. And Isagi just stood there feeling totally awkward and shocked. He realized you can't stop people from thinking that way, so he didn't blame the guy for being worried, even though the other neighbors were totally looking down on him. The food supplies in the village weren't growing at all, and the guy's smile instantly vanished as he heard the frustrating news. Right then, the kid finally made his choice. He shouted at the top of his lungs to get everyone's attention and tried to calm the panicked crowd. Seeing this, Asagi stood straight up. He shouted to the whole village that they could grow his special crops too, and everyone immediately stopped eating to hear him out. He explained that these crops could grow even in their ruined soil, and since they're immune to the cold and viruses, the worried villagers were absolutely stunned by his words. The silver-haired kid promised the whole village he'd share the seeds with everyone, and Hisagi gave them a look that showed he totally meant business. Naya was totally shook by what the guy said, stunned to find out that she actually had the power to grow plants herself. Isaki totally agreed with her, knowing that if Naya took care of those seeds, she'd be growing some super healthy plants with delicious fruit. The girl was totally hyped to hear that. The villagers started whispering like crazy after he spoke, and the man was left completely shook by the news. He literally shouted that he had to be dreaming, completely stunned that the kid offered to fix the food crisis in their village of Pomini. This villager was actually pretty suspicious since Isagi was the new guy in town. So he straight up asked why he was doing so much for people he barely even knew. Mercia started panicking because the guy was being super rude to Isagi. He couldn't wrap his head around why a random stranger was helping them out so much. But Isagi stayed totally chill. The only sign he was fuming was his clenched fist, but then he finally started talking. He told the man his whole story, about how he was abandoned at a church in the capital. Isagi kept spilling his guts about his past, explaining how he had to scrap for every tiny crumb just to survive. And since he was basically starving every single day, the people of Puminya, Isagi finally tells them that he knows exactly what it's like to starve and go without a decent meal every single day. So the kid just smiles and asks them if everyone doesn't just want to eat their fill of amazing food. And even though he's sharing his tragic past, he isn't even sad about it. The man was totally floored by the kid's tragic past, but seeing Isagi still flash a giant smile through all that pain left him staring in absolute shock. He felt totally awkward and apologized to Asagi for not trusting him, but Asagi didn't even care. He said if he were a villager, he'd probably be just as full. One villager stepped up and asked Asagi for some seeds, determined to grow his own food so he could finally have a massive feast every night. Suddenly, one guy threw his hand up. Right away, the rest of the villagers started doing the exact same thing. After that first guy asked, everyone else started crowding around Isagi. Isagi got totally mobbed as everyone charged forward to grab those seeds. He started panicking while trying to settle down the super hyped Puminian villagers. He told them to chill because he had more. It doesn't matter how tough or talented you are, because if you're eating garbage, your heart turns to stone and you lose your way. Which is why even as a top-tier alchemist, Asagi never stopped obsessing over the science of food. The kid started handing out the special seeds he'd spent so much time making. A massive crowd of villagers lined up, all desperate to get their hands on a bag. He knew that when Asagi decided it was time to take farming in this world to the next level, looking totally confident as he watched the villagers celebrate over their new bags of seeds. Right there in the crowd, he spots a guy he knows already clutching a massive bag of seeds. Isagi knew that if the people of Polmenia just started farming sooner, their food problems would be over. And meanwhile, Kelsey was working overtime to get seeds into everyone's hands. The guy with the bag of seeds shouted at the Polmenia villagers again, and just like that, he had everyone's eyes on him. He realized all this hard work was finally going to make the village rich. He hyped everyone up because they finally had a real shot at a better life. The whole crowd cheered and raised their drinks high, and it was pitch black outside once the sun went down. The only thing lighting up the village were these glowing lanterns. Everyone in Polmenia was so hyped for a better life that they spent the whole day. Over at the Ramirez Imperial Castle, the head alchemist was telling his boss about their huge spike in magic tool production when the guy suddenly called him Garius. Turns out the kid was actually the crown prince and next in line for the throne. His name was Ways Dreventure Remoris. He wanted to know why there hadn't. Garius, the head alchemist, was totally shocked that Prince Weiss actually remembered that rude commoner, and he was so speechless that the whole room just went dead silent and awkward. He told Prince Weiss he just straight up fired the commoner. The guy actually thought he was just some random nobody. For a second, the whole room went dead quiet again. The crown. The guy acted all high and mighty, telling the prince that alchemists are only here to build magic weapons for the army, but Asagi was doing the absolute least. Once he heard why Isagi was kicked out, Prince Weiss flipped out and called the long-haired guy a total idiot. He slammed the table so hard it echoed through the whole office. Garius was stunned that the prince was losing his mind just because he fired Asagi, especially since he thought that alchemist was totally worthless. Weiss snapped at Garius, saying he dumped a ton of cash into Asagi's new crops because he was counting on them to fix the empire's massive food crisis. Even with the prince totally fuming, Gary stammers that the low-rank guy's research is complete trash compared to his own magic weapons. But then Crown Prince Weiss started screaming, and that changed everything. He barked at the head alchemist, asking why he even bothered with people who didn't have a high rank. To the prince, the gray-haired guy started shaking like crazy once he realized how much trouble he was in, while the Crown Prince just kept death-staring the head alchemist with pure rage. Garius was literally dripping with cold sweat. The head alchemist was totally panicked and had no idea what to do next. He knew the crown prince was absolutely fuming at it. Prince Weiss looked absolutely furious as he barked at the white-haired guy to find a new way to grow food, but then he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Garius was sweating bullets from the prince's insane rage, just waiting for his master to drop a new plan to fix this mess. Prince Weiss let the silence sink in just to scare him. Then he started yelling and gave the head alchemist a final choice. Garius had to bring Isagi back right now, even if the kid was busy working in the fields. The sun was finally up. This old lady with a hoe couldn't stop thanking Isagi for everything. Honestly, it was all because of him. She never thought anything would actually grow in the... Mercia and Isagi were beaming after their grandma praised their hard work on the farm, and they both said at the exact same time that her happiness was the only thing they cared about. The two finally said goodbye to the old grandma after finishing their mission of giving those special super seeds to everyone in Pomenia. Wait, the input is, things were totally popping off in Pomenia village, with everyone working like crazy in the fields to grow all the fruits and plants from the seeds the boy gave them. The Beast Girl mentions that if things stay peaceful, Pomenia is looking at a huge harvest. And while Isagi totally agrees, something is still really bugging him. Isagi was looking super stressed and stuck in his own head, and as soon as Mercia saw him like that, she got really worried and had to find out what was going on. He explained that Isagi actually took the Empire's fertilizer and made it way better for them to use. But here's the catch. At this rate, they're going to completely run. Isagi kept going, explaining that this was exactly why they needed to make their own fertilizer right there in the village, while the girl just stared at him in total shock. Isagi started weighing his options, realizing that while they could just buy fancy Imperial fertilizer from traveling merchants, it was way smarter to make their own from village scraps to avoid those crazy high prices. She knew that just grabbing fertilizer from Isagi's pocket wasn't going to make this problem go away for good. After hearing what the black-haired girl had to say, Isagi decided his first move was to grab the old fertilizer from Pomenia, and he straight up told Mercia the plan. Mercy listens to the boy's final choice and promises to ask a family she knows in Pomenia if they'll share their fertilizer with her. A bit later, the two of them are back at the house. They've only got 3 kinds of fertilizer from the village sitting on the table. Isagi lets her know that this was enough to start the new Isagi fertilizer, but to make it even stronger, they're going to need materials packed with more of the village's special magic. Mercia just smiles and tells him they need to hit the forest to grab those magic materials for the village, which totally catches Isagi off guard. Mercy told him the forest was the only place to find the rare materials they needed, and as she pointed out the window, a massive forest appeared, making Isagi realize that's exactly where their loot was waiting. Isagi flashed a confident smirk and decided to head out, especially since he already needed to grab some supplies from the forest. But then he suddenly went dead silent. He was totally blown away when she suddenly blurted out that she was coming to the forest with him too. She told him she's been to this forest 1,000,000 times before. Since she's acting as his guide, grabbing all their loot is going to be a total breeze. But the CE was still... Mercier told the kid to chill out and stop panicking. Then she gripped her mop as hard as she could. Mercier just coolly reminded him she's only a servant, all while gripping her mop like it was a deadly weapon. Isagi just stared at the black-haired girl in total confusion, not getting why a maid would be in danger until he realized they actually have to be elite fighters to keep their masters safe. Isagi was totally stunned when she said maids actually need fighting skills to do their jobs, so he just sat there awkwardly accepting that Mercia was basically a secret weapon. A little while later, the two of them finally make it into the woods. Isagi is totally blown away by how beautiful everything looks, but the girl is completely chill because she's been here. They kept trekking along, and the kid was totally hyped, checking out all the wild plants and creatures in the Pomenia forest while Mercia led the way like his personal guide. Isagi looked around and realized the plants here looked way different than the ones in the Empire, probably because they were in the Beast Kingdom. So he asked the black-haired girl about. Mercia just calmly told him that in the wild, it's a non-stop fight to stay alive, so this was totally normal for them. Everything here is evolving at crazy speeds, and while the girl explains why the wildlife is so different from the Empire, Isagi suddenly spots a bush nearby that totally catches his eye. He spotted these wild star-shaped fruits growing on the bush, and was so curious he just had to reach out and touch them. Mercia stopped him right in his tracks. She warned him that touching the fruit would spray him with deadly acid. Isagi freaked out and yanked his hand back instantly. The boy felt totally embarrassed for not checking the plants before grabbing them, but Mercia knew that some of these forest weeds were actually super dangerous. Alchemists can basically scan anything, so the guy locked in and used his examination skill on a fruit bush to see what he was dealing with. This plant is called carambola, and it grows deep in the southern forests of the animal kingdom. But be careful because squeezing its fruit shoots out dangerous acid that you need to wash often. She stared at the plant, trying to figure out the best way to get close to it. Isagi really needed to grab those tough carambola fruits. He figured he could use them too, so Mercia decides to jump in and help him gather all those fruits. She uses a thick cloth to grab them so the acid doesn't leak out and burn them. It turns out, the girl held the fruit steady with a thick towel while Isagi used some small scissors to easily snip it right off the carambola plant. Next, he got straight to work gathering materials from the fruit trees. He poked the star fruits with a needle to drain the acid into test tubes before stashing it all in his magic bag. Isagi wiped the sweat from his forehead, looking pretty worn out, but he admitted out loud that getting together for practice was actually a total blast. Mercia heard him out and asked Isagi about people meeting up in the Empire, since she was pretty sure the rules there didn't actually allow it. He knew she was right, especially since he'd always been told that gathering materials was a job way better left to the knights and adventurers. He finally got his hands on the materials and was about to keep yapping, but then he just froze out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, the girl screams for her master, and a pale Isagi looks off to the side in total shock, looking completely terrified. Suddenly, a terrifying monster pops up right in front of them. It looks just like a wild boar, but this thing is way bigger than any normal pig you've ever seen. They stared nervously at the massive boar that just popped up out of nowhere as Isagi whispered to the girl about the monster. Mercier warned him that this massive boar was actually a demon, a total beast that would go wild and shred anyone with its giant, sharp tusks. Suddenly, this terrifying demon sprints right at them with its mouth wide open, drool flying everywhere as it gets ready to bite down with those giant fangs. Isagi was shaking with fear, totally terrified of the crazy stuff they had to do just to survive this demonic monster. Suddenly, a girl calls out to him in a super chill voice, snapping him back to reality as he turns to look her right in the eyes. She told Isagi to back off and let her handle the monster alone. And as Mercier stepped in front of him with total confidence, Isagi was left completely stunned and desperate to stop her. Right then, a massive, terrifying boar comes charging straight at them, and this demon beast is totally ready to take both of them out. This massive boar came charging straight at the girl with everything it had. Mercia didn't even flinch, getting ready to take the beast down. Isagi stood nearby, watching her with a super shores. Just as the demon monster lunged at the black-haired girl, she vanished into thin air, making him totally miss with those sharp fangs. The monster was totally confused when she vanished and started looking everywhere for its meal, while Isagi stood just a few feet away, keeping a super close eye on the demonic boar. The monster suddenly looked up and his eyes went wide as a girl's shadow fell right over his face. She was hovering directly above him. Turns out Mercy was hanging right over that creepy monster's head. She suddenly leaped up and pulled off a crazy flip in midair. The massive boar spotted her and bolted forward to dodge them. Mercia pulls off a series of insane midair flips to catch up to the fleeing monster and winds up a massive punch for that beastly boar. She charged right at the stunned demon boar with her fist raised, needing to take it down fast to make sure Isagi stayed safe. She charges the demon monster and punches it straight in the snout. The giant boar doesn't even have time to dodge her attack. All it can do is take the full force of that hit. She hits the demon boar with so much power that it flies back and smashes right into a tree, and Asagi barely dodges just in time to keep from getting crushed by the flying beast. She absolutely decked that demonic boar, watching it fly back several meters as East Sidey was finally safe from the monster. Isagi's jaw hit the floor when Mercia one-shot that massive demon boar, and he couldn't stop staring at the beast this black-haired girl just totally wrecked. Mercier made it clear she wasn't letting her master Isagi waste his time on trash like this. She casually dusted off her maid outfit like it was nothing after taking down that massive boar. Isagi knew beast folk were naturally stronger than everyone else, but Mercy's power was totally off the charts, making him realize there was no way she was just a regular servant. So Marcia heard his question and told him straight up that she really was a servant. Then she went quiet for a second to figure out what to say next. Mercier kept explaining things to Isagi, saying the only reason a beast race girl like her can work at the castle is because she's a total powerhouse in battle. So Mercia ended up taking on all sorts of different jobs during the night. She was totally cool with it too. She can see perfectly in the dark and looking like a harmless maid. He gave the black-haired girl a warm smile, thinking it was only natural to push beast folk harder since the whole empire looked down on them. She suddenly remembered her job was pressuring her to do some really shady stuff lately. So Mercia was just glad she quit with Asagi. Even though he was totally shocked to hear about the dark, Isagi told Mercia that because of her and the other guards, a guy like him could actually live safely inside the castle. She heard what he said and just stared at him, totally blown away by his words. Aggie kept talking, thanking his buddy for always having his back, and he gave Mercia a huge, grateful smile for everything. She was totally stunned by his heartfelt thanks and just stood there in silence, completely unable to find the right words. Mercia turned bright red and tried to play it cool, insisting that guarding him all night was just part of her job and totally wasn't a big deal. Mercy's face turned bright red as she looked away, totally embarrassed to even look at the guy. But her true feelings were obvious because her black tail was wagging like crazy. Suddenly, the guy switches gears because Isagi realizes there should be a magic stone hidden inside the monster's body, but Mercia is totally clueless since she's never even heard of them before. Isagi explains that monsters suck up magic from the air and their food, stashing it all inside a magic stone. Alchemists actually use those stones to craft all sorts of cool items. Then, he confidently searched the monster's body, tracking its magic flow to find exactly where that boar's magic stone was hidden. Asagi scanned the boar's body with his hand until he finally pinned down the magic flow right in the beast's neck. Isagi rummaged through his magic bag and whipped out a dagger, aiming it right at the point where all that boar's magic was pulsing. The boy and the black-haired girl sliced the monster right where its magic was pulsing, and found something so insane that they both just stood there in total shock. Suddenly, the magic stone from that beastly boar appeared right in front of them. This thing was massive and packed with some seriously high-quality magic power. They really hit the jackpot by taking down, but the girl wasn't buying it, telling him that even though this beast looked massive, it was actually just a medium-sized monster for this forest, which totally blew his mind. Back in the capital, you'd never see a monster bigger than your hand. But out here, giant boar-sized beasts are totally normal, so Isagi asks Mercia just how many monsters are actually lurking around Pomenia village. Mercia thought for a second and then told Isagi that if they didn't keep the monster numbers down, a massive horde would swarm their village, Pomenia, leaving Isagi totally. This was the perfect chance to snag a bunch of high-quality magic stones, and now he could actually pull it off. Isagi was totally pumped to turn those magic stones into fertilizer since it was way faster than using any other magic stuff. The girl tells him they need to loot a ton of magic stones from those beasts, and Isagi is totally down, so they head out to hunt their next target. Their monster hunt got cut short when a girl suddenly stopped them in their tracks. Before they went looking for more magic stones, Mercia had something she needed to tell Isagi. Turns out, the girl wanted to keep the meat from that demon boar she just wrecked because monster meat is actually super delicious, and before she could even finish talking, Mercia was already jumping down to the Yujda. Asagi felt bad and apologized because he was totally obsessed with finding fertilizer stuff, while Marcia just needed a minute to carve up that demon boar. Mercia starts carving up the monster, and while she's busy slicing the boar, the boy pulls a wooden barrel right out of his magic bag, making Isagi realize this place is nothing like. To stay alive, they had to hunt for every single meal. Take Mercia, for example. She was totally locked in, carefully carving up the body of a massive demon boar. She had all sorts of sharp tools lying around to carve up that massive beast. There was even a bucket ready to catch all the gross fluids and mess. Without wasting a second, she tossed. Isagi realized he was back to just gathering loot and making stuff for everyone else. So as he watched Mercia carve up a massive boar, he called out to her and totally broke her focus. One more check on one line and equals one line out. The input has 3 sentences. If the user meant one line as the whole block, I provide one block. If they meant, Mercia just stared at Isagi in total shock after he suddenly asked her to teach him how to butcher a monster. But then she just flashes him a sweet smile and agrees to help him learn how to butcher a carcass. It wasn't long before their little bag was bursting with magic stones, and just like that, the job was finished. Mercia tells Isagi it's time to head back to the village. They were standing right next to a massive pile of monsters they just took out. Isagi realized that with this, Isagi started heading back to the village. But as soon as he stepped forward, he felt something weird under his foot and froze in his tracks. He dropped to one knee and stared at his hand in total shock, seeing it was covered in the same dirt he just stepped on. The kid noticed the dirt under his feet was starting to look different, and that's when it hit him. They were way deep in the forest now. That's why the kid was totally over his village and didn't want to go back. Izagi was dying to see what else was hidden deep inside that forest. He told his... The boy points to a mountain way off in the distance and asks if there's any ore there, making the girl turn her head to check it out. She told him the ore was definitely on that mountain, but Mercia was worried that going straight for it would just take way too long. Yasagi told Marcia not to sweat it because his alchemy could find the deposit way faster than she expected, and that totally calmed her nerves. The kids stared at the distant mountain with total focus, because if they found ore there, Asagi could finally build way more golems and massive structures, and he was totally down for that. Isagi was totally hyped and told his buddy it was time to go hunting for ore on that mountain right nearby. After a while, they finally made it to the mountain they were looking for. To get across, they had to navigate this super narrow path right on the cliffside. The girl was really worried about him. Isaki told her he was totally fine, but deep down he was freaking out because the path was so thin he could fall off the cliff at any second. He was a total nervous wreck, sweating like crazy as he struggled to stay on the narrow mountain path without slipping and falling off. Mercio breezed through the narrow path without a care in the world, leaving the guy totally jealous of how she could pull off those moves in a maid outfit. Suddenly, she just leaps straight off the edge, skipping the long winding path to take the ultimate shortcut. Isagi couldn't pull off those insane jumps, so he was stuck hiking through the sketchy paths by himself. And when some exhausted dude walked up to Mercia, she just told him there was a secret tunnel right there. Isagi was gasping for air after surviving those sketchy mountain paths. And even though he was soaked in sweat and totally drained, they finally made it to where they needed to be. The duo finally stepped into the underground tunnel they were looking for. Isagi could tell right away that this place was super ancient. Mercia explained that the whole tunnel was falling apart because it was... Isagi checked out the tunnel and realized the walls were hardened with fire to keep them from caving in. And even though the wooden beams looked ancient, they were still doing a solid job holding up the ceiling. He asked Mercy if he could fix the busted part of the tunnel, and she totally gave him the green light. The kid holds up his hand and fires up his magic. Suddenly, a huge magic circle pops up right at the tunnel's entrance. Then Isagi uses his alchemy to totally rebuild and beef. He finally pulled it off, making the tunnel super strong and ready for his big hunt for rare ores. After Marcia finished reinforcing the walls, she started leading him deep inside. Isagi just hung back. She stayed a few steps ahead, leading him right into the underground tunnel while he stopped to scope out the entrance's design. Isagi stepped into the tunnel and felt totally bummed because it was way too dark to see, which meant he couldn't study the layout or figure out how to find his way through. Isagi remembered that beast people have crazy night vision, so Mercia was chilling in the dark, but she immediately felt bad and apologized for forgetting to bring him a lamp. He pulls the lamp out of his magic bag and twists the button, letting the glowing stone inside light up the whole underground passage. A warm glow from the lamp lit up the dark tunnel. Isagi pushed forward through the underground path, using the light to guide his steps. Turns out this wasn't just a regular lamp. The girl took over carrying the magic device so Isagi could focus on finding ore deposits, and he gave her a quick thanks for the assist. They eventually made it deep into a dark tunnel, and while the girl lit the way with her lamp, Isagi scanned the walls for any signs of valuable ore. Using his alchemist senses, the kid quickly tracked down the hidden ore and pointed exactly where they needed to go next. He walked right up to the stone wall in the tunnel and pressed his hand against it, using his alchemy powers to sense something hidden deep inside. This section of the underground wall was absolutely loaded with ore, and the guy was totally geeking out to his friend while Mercia held up her lamp to light the way. She ditches the lamp and pulls a pickaxe out of thin air to start mining, but Isagi stops her and says she doesn't even need to do that. He explained to Mercia that there's a trick to getting the ore out, because if alchemy can make stuff super strong with magic, it can also do the opposite and make it break instantly. The kid presses his hands against a specific spot on the tunnel's stone wall. Instantly, a glowing magic circle pops up right where he's touching. He figured that if he... To blast through the stone wall blocking the ore, Vinny Zaggy activated his alchemy and a massive magic circle spread across the tunnel wall. The magic circle totally trashed the place, but it actually made the ore they needed pop right out of the ruins, so Isagi told the black-haired girl to start grabbing all the loot off the ground. Isagi pressed his hand against the tunnel wall again, ready to get right back to work mining that ore. He tracked down the ore deposits in seconds and marked them. Then a bunch of alchemy magic circles popped up on the wall so he could aim and blast them. Mercia was totally stunned to see the girl had already stuffed almost all the ores that fell from the tunnel walls right into her bag. Suddenly, tons of ore started bursting out of the magic circles, and Hisagi bolted ahead to find even more spots to mine. Chunks of different ores kept flying out of the smashed walls and hitting the floor, But then Isagi suddenly shouted for Mercia, making him stop and turn toward the black-haired girl. Marcia actually needed him to slow down because her legs were totally covered in ore up to her knees, and a shocked Isagi immediately started apologizing to the black-haired girl. She finally managed to wiggle out from under that massive pile of ore, and when Isagi told her they were going to sort and process everything right there, Mercia just nodded and followed his lead. The boy plopped down on the floor with the black-haired girl, checking every single rock while Mercia waited for his verdict under the glow of a lamp. He soon realized they'd found a massive haul of iron, copper, lead, and magic ore, plus a little gold and some rare gems. Isagi kept scanning through all the different ores, but just like he figured, there wasn't a single piece of adamantite or mithril in the whole pile. She told him she didn't expect anything less from Mr. Isagi, which totally caught him off guard since he had no clue what she meant, so he just stared at Mercia with a completely yee. She told him that everyone would be desperate for that drilling tech, basically proving that Isagi is a total pro. Isagi explained that alchemists are actually thrown into extraction chambers, and since it's a total nightmare to survive there, the nobles consider it brutal hard labor. Isagi was basically a regular there since he got sent back all the time. The guys' faces instantly dropped just thinking about that place. The backbreaking work they had to do was a total, but a second later, he snapped out of it and shook off those bad memories because it was time for Isagi to start processing that new ore. Usagi aimed his palm right at the orb, ready to blast it with his magic power. Then his magic started flowing into the rock. Suddenly, that ugly lump transformed into a perfect metal ingot. The whole thing totally changed its structure. The girl caught the finished bar looking completely stunned. The metal was so insanely smooth it worked just like a mirror, and the girl was totally blown away as she stared at the polished ingot. He kept grinding through all those different ores to speed things up, and as soon as the girl snapped out of it, she jumped right in to help him out. Before long, the two of them just got back to work in total silence. Isagi was super focused on processing all that ore he'd just picked up. The girl just chilled, and after a while, he finally finished working through almost every type of ore. A bunch of metal ingots in all different sizes were now just sitting there on the floor. Looking at his massive haul, the girl asked if they'd scored much ore from the mountain. And since they'd actually hauled in a ton, Isagi knew they could craft some seriously awesome stuff with it. The kid was hyped to build a whole army of golems, and Isagi was just as stoked to level up the farm with better tools for a massive harvest. Isagi was losing his mind with joy because he finally pulled it off, but the girl was totally lost and asked him what he was even talking about. Isagi turns to the black-haired girl and gives Mercio a smug grin, completely ignoring her question. They finally made it back to the village and stopped at an empty field near their house, where Isagi hyped himself up and told the black-haired girl that this was the exact spot he was going to build his workshop. She was totally caught off guard by what he said, so she had to ask him about that workshop one more time. Isagi warned her that if his alchemy goes wrong, the whole building could literally blow up, and since it smells totally gross, he needs a workshop far away from the house. Mercia offered to help him build the workshop, but Isagi turned her down, saying he could handle the whole thing himself. Then the guy switched gears and told Marcia the second harvest was finally here, asking her to help the villagers out in the fields as she listened closely. The boy already turned away as Marcia walked off with her basket, heading to the fields to help the village with the second harvest. Now that Isagi was finally by himself, he was totally ready to get to work. Building this workshop was going to be a huge project, so he didn't want to waste any time getting... First, he had to figure out how big this workshop was actually going to be. He started pacing around, using his own steps to measure the whole place out. Isagi was already dreaming of a workspace that was totally massive. Keeping up a giant workshop would be a total pain, so he ditched that plan and used tape and posts to mark out the house size he actually needed. Isagi realized there was no point in splitting his workshop into different rooms. Just one workspace and a storage area were more than enough for him. Right then, he started pulling out the tape. He grabbed some tape and posts to mark out the perfect spot for his new workshop. This was the exact size he needed to get to work. It was actually going to be way bigger than his own house. A bit later, the kid hauled over everything he needed to start building his own workshop. He had some damp wood and a bunch of bricks to make the place extra strong. Now, the kid pulls out a wooden box and sets it right on the ground. Next, he dumps cement and sand out of a cloth bag and into the box. He mixes it all up using... Isagi slapped a magic circle onto the box of sand and cement, using alchemy to blend it all together perfectly in a split second. He pokes a hole right in the center, pours in some water, and stirs it all up until it's thick, smooth, and finally ready to go. The mortar in the wooden box was finally ready, and it turned out perfectly thick and totally smooth. The kid starts stacking bricks along the outer wall using nothing but his magic power. At the same time, he's already coating them in cement. He's pulling off this whole construction job with the boy. Isagi slapped down the cement and started stacking bricks again, just repeating the same motion over and over like a total machine. Isagi's workshop was finally coming together and was almost ready. He'd already knocked out all the heavy lifting. The only thing left on his list was finishing the roof. Asagi was working up a sweat building the workshop, but looking at the nearly finished project, he noticed that even though it was just bricks, the place already had an awesome vibe. He took a second to plan his next move, got right back to building his workshop, and then started decking out the inside to make it look awesome. A bit later, the girl comes back from the fields carrying a basket. She just finished helping the rest of the village wrap up the harvest. Marcia keeps walking straight ahead without even looking where. She turned toward the workshop and shouted to the guy, asking him how the building was actually coming along. That's when she finally got a clear look at the guy's workshop, and Mercier just froze in place, totally blown away by how cool it looked. Suddenly, she spots this massive, gorgeous brick house standing right in front of her. It wasn't flashy or over the top, but it felt super warm and cozy. You could tell. She headed over to the new workshop and could already hear the guy's voice from the street, making Usagi so hyped that the place finally looked like a legit alchemist's lab. Mercier gave the workshop door a soft knock to see if she could come in, and even though Usagi was super busy, he heard her voice and let her in right away. The girl swung open the door to Asagi's workshop, but she didn't actually step inside. Mercius just stood there at the entrance for a second, totally frozen. The girl finds a bright room full of windows where a table is already loaded with alchemy gear, and Asagi is busy unpacking boxes and getting everything organized. He gave the frozen girl an awkward look before Asagi claimed he was just redecorating, leaving Marcia staring at him in total, silent awe. She told him his place looked totally awesome. The workshop looked great from the outside, but the inside was even cooler. Isagi started blushing like crazy at her compliment. He was super hyped that the guy totally geeked out and started rambling about his workshop, explaining how he tweaked the wood resin to keep the walls from being too bright and shiny. As soon as Asagi did that, the room got this super cozy, warm glow that wasn't blinding anymore, and he started geeking out about his workshop's new lineup with total hype. He even built a brick wall to give the place a cool vintage vibe, and while Isaki was totally hooked on his workshop story, Mercy just watched him with a super sweet smile. Mercia flashed a sweet smile and congratulated him on finishing the building, since he finally had a legit workshop for all his wild research and experiments. Asagi flashed a smile and thanked her, then leaned right into Mercy's face. She turned bright red being that close, but Asagi didn't even notice. He was just stoked that he could finally do all the research he wanted. She's totally blushing because he's way too close, so she quickly looks away. Still feeling awkward, she asks if he needs a hand moving his furniture around. Isagi suddenly remembered something and asked the black-haired girl to put a bed in the workshop so he could crash there for a nap. Mercia shut down his request for a workshop bed instantly, leaving him totally shocked and wondering why she rejected him so fast. Mercier gave him a dark look, explaining that if she put a bed in his workshop, he'd just stay there forever because he's way too lazy to even walk back to the house. Asagi was totally stunned by her story, and with no way to argue back, he just had to take the black-haired girl's word for it. But Mercia wasn't backing down at all, and Isagi realized she saw right through his act. He tried to ask her for something besides a bed, but Mercia already knew what was up and totally shut down his plan to put a sofa in the workshop. Mercia pouted and said she was just trying to keep him healthy, so she got all annoyed and told him to go home and sleep in his own bed already. Isagi totally folded under the pressure and agreed with a pouting Mercia, finally accepting that he wasn't going to be sleeping in his workshop tonight. He quickly switched topics to get that black-haired girl off his back, telling her to start making fertilizer right away, and Mercia decided to jump in and help him out. To whip up the perfect fertilizer for Pomania, they scavenged the local woods and mines, which reminded Isagi of that crazy demon boar and the hidden ore tunnels. Today was finally the big day to craft that new fertilizer, so the kid set his plant down on the table with all the other supplies, while Mercier handed him a drawing board. To get things moving, they needed the 3 fertilizers used by the Pominia villagers, and the boy stared at the bag sitting right there on the table. Isagi asked Mercia how those 3 upgraded fertilizers from Pominia village turned out, and she started breaking down the results. She read straight from the document, telling him that Plumina's fertilizer was still way worse than the Empire stuff. Mercier had a folder packed with all the progress stats and handed it over for Isagi to check out. Isagi scanned the data and realized only the current fertilizer had a limit, looking totally locked in as he studied the charts. He figured mixing the fertilizer with a new ingredient was the move, but Mersha warned him it would take way too long. He knew making fertilizer from scratch would take years, but luckily, he had a document packed with all the Empire's data. Plus, they were totally loaded with high-grade magic stones. The boy flashed a grin as he showed the black-haired girl the loot they'd just taken from the monsters. So, she stared at the stones with total doubt because they just looted them from random forest monsters. But the guy promised her they were actually top-tier loot. He told her that back in the capital, one magic stone costs a crazy 20 silver coins, and Mercio was totally blown away by how expensive they were. Back in their village of Palmenia, these magic stones usually go for just 1 silver coin, and Isagi is so shook by the price that he literally drops the stone right out of his hands. Still totally shook, the boy calls out to the black-haired girl, asking if magic stones are actually just a normal thing back in her village of Pomini. She agreed that magic stones are totally normal in her village, explaining that basically everyone around there has at least one. This news hit Asagi even harder, and he sounded totally crushed when he answered her, while Mercia just stared at him, wondering why he was acting so weird. He snapped back to reality and smirked at his reflection in the magic stone, knowing he was going to turn it into some top-tier fertilizer, and Isagi told him exactly that with total confidence. They got right back to work. Isagi's first move was mixing a magic stone into the fertilizer. He told Mercia to grab some pots so they could test it out. Isagi tried to get the magic under control, but the second he grabbed the stone, it blasted straight into the air. To control the wild energy inside the stone, the boy had to balance it out just as the magic started overflowing from his hands. Suddenly, the magic stone floated even higher as crazy energy started blasting out of it. But Isagi stayed totally cool and took full control of all that power. Once the stone's energy finally chilled out, Isagi used his alchemy to wipe away all the junk and make it pure. Everything was finally set to go. Right above his hand, a super pure magic stone was just floating there, totally cleared of any junk. Isagi looked at the finished stone and flashed a huge grin. Right as the magic stone was finally cleaned and sorted, Mercia showed up with a massive pile of pots, and Isagi thanked the black-haired girl for coming through. The grill was totally drawn to the magic stone Isagi worked on. It looked way different than the others because he'd scrubbed away all the gross impurities. Mercy was definitely impressed and she noticed the polished magic stone was actually super beautiful. It was glowing with this crazy pure purple light. Isagi told her that fancy nobles in the Empire even wear these things as jewelry. Mercy stared at the gorgeous magic stone in total awe, wondering what other crazy things she could actually do with it. Mercy was totally freaked out watching him crush those gorgeous magic stones into fertilizer, but Isagi didn't care about their looks at all and just kept smashing them to pieces. The guy saw how upset she was and apologized to the black-haired girl, since she'd been totally hyped about those pretty magic stones, and Mercia was bummed they were all smashed. She tried to act chill and told him the magic stone was just a basic material, but her eyes were full of sadness as she stared at those pots. The girl rushed off to grab more pots for Isagi, and while the guy grinding the stone was totally cool with it, Isagi couldn't shake this bad feeling as he watched her leave. Isagi saw her animal ears droop because she was so sad about the broken magic stone, so he decided he'd definitely get her some magic stone jewelry next time to make it up to her. He told himself this was just one more reason to keep pushing forward. Isagi kept grinding down the ingredients to make a brand new fertilizer for the soil in Polminia village. He started tossing ingredients onto the magic stone, like grass that grows like crazy, bug-proof plants, and some genjid to help it break down before mixing it all together with the stuff they found in the forest. The boy quickly finished a sample of his new fertilizer, and Mercia, holding a pot, told him they had to test it out right away. Next, they grabbed some ink and slapped a new number on the pot. Since this was officially their first experiment, they painted a big number 1 right on the side. Then, they filled the whole thing. Right away, they dropped a special arugula seed into the pot, buried it under the dirt, and gave it some water. Suddenly, an arugula sprout popped right out of the pot, and Isagi was totally blown away by how insanely fast it grew. But the plant didn't stop there and just kept on growing. It didn't stop for even a single second, and in a flash, arugula went from a tiny sprout to... Isagi was hyped to see the arugula ready to go, and since it grew like crazy, he now had a massive pile of healthy greens. Isagi looked over at the arugula on the right and was totally blown away by how much it grew with that fertilizer, so he got ready to write the results down. But the arugula didn't stop there. It kept shooting up until it was way taller than both of them, and Isagi was just standing there, totally hyped and shocked. That arugula was getting seriously huge. It shot up several meters high, becoming totally massive. The stems didn't even look normal anymore. They got super thick because of how fast it was soaking up. Mercia was totally stunned by how fast the plant was growing, and she and the boy watched as the arugula shot up to the ceiling and started grabbing onto the wooden boards. Mercia casually warned Isagi that if that arugula plant grew even an inch more, the whole workshop would come crashing down, and Isagi was totally freaked out. Isagi sprints over to the arugula plant. He aims his palm right at the bottom of the stem. Then he knocks the whole pot over. Isagi instantly blasted the plant with magic and crushed its base to stop it from growing and totally wrecking the house. He used his alchemy to wreck the plant and then quickly shoved the whole thing right off the table. Isagi totally panicked when he realized how dangerous this actually was. He stared at the plant he'd knocked over with a super bummed out look. Just because he was curious, the girl pointed out that the plant grew way bigger than they ever expected, and while Mercia thought it was just the thick grass, Ayer figured it was the high-quality magic working together, making this their very first failed experiment. Isagi decided to try pulling the magic right out of that stone, but he knew he had to pick the perfect one to see if his new brew would actually work. To find the perfect fertilizer for Pomenia Village, he had to test every single thing one by one. And now he's just staring at a plant that's barely growing because his last experiment was a total bust. Isagi flashed a grin and told the girl that the fertilizer job was going to be a total grind, but they had to give it their all to see results while Mercia cleared away the ruined arugula. Mercia flashed a warm smile while holding her plants, really hoping she could help him make the fertilizer Pomenia Village needed. A while later, it was already pouring rain outside, but the two of them were still hanging out in the workshop. They slapped a new number on the pot for round 2, and Isagi planted the arugula seeds again using a totally different fertilizer. But the result was exactly the same as the last test. That arugula plant shot up to a massive size all over again, and Isagi knew exactly what he had to do next. Isagi was already on his 73rd try, and even though the plant finally grew to its full size, it shriveled up and died instantly, leaving him totally crushed. Their next fertilizer test was another total fail, and even though they tried growing sweet peppers and the fruit actually started to grow, the whole plant just shriveled up and died. Which really, time flew by, and it was pitch black outside, but the two of them were still grinding away in the workshop, obsessed with making the ultimate fertilizer. They'd already blown past dozens of tests. They were actually on their 200th attempt by now. And there was the girl, back at it again, sticking special labels. Back at his desk, Isagi was grinding like crazy, scribbling down new fertilizer recipes to fix his old mistakes while a huge pile of trashed paper started stacking up. Isagi finally took a break from mixing fertilizer, looking up with a worn-out smile and eyes that were totally zoned out. Grinding through all these experiments with Marcia really took him back to the days when they lived in the Empire. He got a little caught up in the past for a second, but he had to snap out of it and get back to making his fertilizer recipes even better. A little while later, they decided to give it another shot. The table was a total mess, covered in broken pots from all their failed attempts. So the two of them grabbed a fresh pot and Mercia slowly started pouring water onto the planted seed. Shinisaji was totally stressed out, thinking one wrong move would ruin it all. The boy was ready to use his alchemy to wipe away. Right as the water hits the dirt, the seed instantly shoots up into a sprout, marking their 252nd attempt with this fertilizer. Isagi and Mercio kept their eyes glued to the sprout, totally ready for action, and in no time at all, that tiny seed exploded into a full-grown plant covered in ripe peppers. The plant looked awesome with its juicy, ripe, sweet peppers, but Isagi and Marcia were totally stunned to see it had suddenly stopped growing. Mercy told him the stems and leaves looked totally normal, proving this plant is a perfect match for the Empire's fertilizer. Isagi slumped against the table in total shock, barely whispering that everything was finally ready. The kid grabbed the pot with tears of joy in his eyes because the experiment was a total win. They finally nailed the perfect fertilizer formula. It took 3 whole weeks of non-stop grinding to make. They figured out how to make fertilizer using only stuff from the village, meaning their shortage problems were officially over. Isagi cheered and totally agreed with the black-haired girl, hyped that the village's farms were finally safe. But the kid's mood totally tanked when he realized he was the only alchemist in town, and if he got hurt, the whole fertilizer supply would just stop. Mercier suggested giving the fertilizer recipe to the city's alchemists, but Isagi was pretty sure they weren't skilled enough to actually pull it off. So Mercia was hyped and told him to just make a simpler recipe. But Isagi wasn't so sure since he had no clue how good the city's alchemists actually were. The room went dead silent as Mercia felt totally defeated for not finding a way out, while Isagi stayed quiet, desperately trying to cook up a plan to save them. They couldn't find an answer, so the two of them just pushed the problem aside for now. They really weren't in the mood to deal with anything complicated. Finally, on their bright and early the next day, Isagi thanked the girl for the awesome meal she cooked. Those veggies they ate were actually super tasty. Mercier was on the same page and loved the food too. Isagi decides to help her out with the dishes, and as he starts scrubbing away, Merci makes sure to thank him. Sagi noticed that whenever he and Marcia were hanging out, their conversations would just randomly hit a super awkward silence. Surprisingly, Isagi didn't feel awkward around her at all, and he just kept washing the dishes with a big smile on his face. Isagi tells Mercia that doing chores together makes them look like a married couple, and she instantly freaks out as her face turns bright red. Mercia's face turned bright red as she looked away, stuttering about them being a married couple while trying to find the courage to say something to him. She was just about to speak when a sudden knock at the door cut her off, and since the person outside was looking for Isagi the alchemist, the guy told her to keep washing. Isagi noticed Mercia was super annoyed because she looked totally miserable and her cattail was whipping around in a rage, but she just mumbled that everything was totally fine. Isagi headed to the door, figuring Mercia was just salty because the black-haired girl hated doing dishes. And then he opened it up to find a total stranger standing. Out of nowhere, a bag just pops up right in front of him. Isagi looks around, but there's absolutely nobody there. He's totally weirded out that the place is... This tiny beast girl showed up, lugging around a massive backpack that looked way too heavy for her. He looked at her and realized she was a dog-type beast human, and since she was so tiny, he totally thought she was just a kid. She introduced herself with a big smile as Kanya from the wonderful trading company, and she was there to talk serious business with a guy named Hisoji. Isagi was totally shocked they actually wanted to make a deal, but the girl just gave him a big smile and asked if they could head inside his place to talk about the details. He finally catches on and lets her inside, leading her to the living room while she says sorry for just barging into his house. Kanya bolts up the front stairs to get inside, while the girl doesn't even try to take off her massive backpack. Her backpack was so massive and stuffed that she couldn't even get inside Asagi's house. And even though she tried to force her way in, Asagi had to tell her that there was no way that giant bag was fitting through his front door. Kanya had no choice but to ditch her massive stuffed backpack outside, leaving it sitting all alone on the ground. She sat down and apologized for the trouble, but even though Kanya wanted to say more to Asagi and the black-haired girl, she realized she didn't even know the girl. The room went dead silent as she struggled to find the right words, and Mercy was totally caught off guard by the way Kanye just kept staring her down. Kanye looked at him with pure respect and asked if Mercia was his wife, totally catching the girl by surprise. The boy hyped her up to Kanye, saying she was his servant and the village chief's daughter, while Marcia was literally shaking from all the intense emotions hitting her. Kanye felt super awkward and apologized for asking that, but Mercia just flashed a big smile and told her not to sweat it before heading off to make tea for everyone. Isagi caught her humming a happy song as she walked away. He was totally shocked to see Mercy in such a great mood. It was weird, because she was just super angry and complaining about everything. He was totally thrown off by how fast Mercia's mood just flipped. Honestly, he still had zero clue how a girl's heart actually worked. With a big smile, Mercia finally serves the tea she made, and Konyanya is totally shocked by how good it is, so the whole crew, Isagi, Mercia, and Konyaya, just right after Kanya, the dog race grabbed the cup and tasted the teeth the girl had ready for her. Konea was hyped because the tea was both bitter and sweet, so she asked for the secret ingredient and found out Mercia just used wolfberry leaves she picked from the forest. She was totally hyped about this, so Kanya quickly scribbled the wolfberry leaf tea recipe into her notebook because brewing them makes it taste absolutely amazing. Kanya decided to just buy them, and the girl started scribbling notes so fast that Isagi was left totally shocked, wondering where she even pulled that notebook from. While the girl was busy scribbling down notes on those wolfberry leaves, Isagi leaned in and whispered to Mercia about that epic trading company, dying to know what they were actually like. Mercia explained that Wonderful was a massive trading company and a total big deal even in the Beast Kingdom. They've got a huge main office in the royal capital and shops all over the place. He was blown away by how huge the company was and had no clue why a big-shot businesswoman like Kanya would even want to talk to him. She finished scribbling down all the info, slammed her notebook shut, and apologized for making them wait so long. Kanye told them she'd noticed a huge spike in top-tier crops at the market lately, which left both the boy and Mercia totally stunned. Konyon was totally blown away by how fast these crops grew all year round, and they tasted way better than anything the animal kingdom had ever seen. She tracked down where this insane crop came from, and it led her right to Pamenia village. She had to travel a super long way just to get there. Mercia finally put it together. She was talking about the huge harvest in Pumenia village. Izagi also figured out the real reason she showed up. Since the village was producing so much food lately, so Kanya finally figures out Isagi is the secret behind the massive harvest, and she's so hyped that her tail starts wagging like crazy as she agrees with it. She thought it was super weird that other villages couldn't grow crops like Plumina did, but Isagi acted like it was totally obvious, and his answer left Kanya completely stunned. Isagi explains that he used alchemy to custom make these crops just for this specific dirt. Even though they're easy to grow, you could never get them this good anywhere else. Right then, she was blown away that they were actually using alchemy for farming. They were literally using magic to pick out the best crops. She quickly scribbled all these notes down so she wouldn't miss a. Isagi totally agreed with her as Kanya kept scribbling every single detail into her notebook, proving that her big-shot business skills made her a total pro at picking things up fast, and she finished scribbling everything down and snapped her notebook shut, ready to finally dive into the real deal. Kanya asked Isagi to sell his crops to her company all the time, and both he and Mercia were totally shocked by the huge offer. He realized the village was running out of supplies, so keeping a solid connection with that massive trading company was a total must for them. The guy was actually down for the deal, but he had some rules first, so Kanya asked what they were to get the talk started. Isagi told her he's an alchemist who can't craft anything without the right materials, so he demanded they get his supplies delivered as a top priority. After he laid out his deal for the alchemy materials, she just gave a chill nod and a calm smile. She flashed a proud smile and told him it was no big deal for their awesome company to get any material they needed from the Beast Kingdom. Isagi asked her about finding alchemy supplies outside the Empire, but Kanya just looked away all awkward because she couldn't promise him anything. The guys were finally out of questions, so Kanye asked Mercia and Isagi how much they could actually sell on the regular, which was a massive deal since their whole trade plan depended on. He was totally ready for that and whipped out a paper showing the harvest numbers to skip the boring stuff and get straight to the trade deal. Cornea started digging through the weekly harvest numbers to see exactly what they were making. She asked exactly how much of the harvest they could actually give her, and honestly, that's the most important question of the whole story. Mercia was totally hyped, claiming Mr. Asagi's new plants could handle any amount of work they threw at them. Kanye was honestly shocked to see how much these guys were grinding for. She was blown away by their insane speed, especially since these guys can ship out cargo every single week. She asked if they could get way more supplies so they could finish the job even faster. Isaki gave it some thought, since boosting the actual volume is way harder than it looks. Right now, it's just Gollum and the boys doing all the heavy lifting, and if they push any harder in the fields, they'll be way too exhausted for anything else. He's brainstorming how to link his fertilizer, the best seeds, and his magic tool production into one ultimate system. And he's definitely not ready to start grinding like a real farmer just yet. He still had a ton of work to finish, and he wasn't ready to deal with something that serious just yet. Since he was so busy, Kanya suggested they just hire some workers to handle. Isagi and Marcia repeated those words right back. It only took them a second to realize how cool this actually was, and they were shocked they could even let someone else handle the work for them. Isagi couldn't believe he missed something so obvious. He was probably just used to grinding until he was totally wiped out. He honestly never thought that anyone could actually pull this off. She thought Kanya's idea was a total game changer, telling Isagi to focus on his alchemy while others handle the farming so they can grow all kinds of crazy new fruits and veggies. He squeezed his hand into a rock-solid fist. Now Isagi is totally locked in and he's ready to do exactly what Kanya told him. This guy is turning that empty land into a giant field, and it's going to be a massive game changer for their work. Punia pointed at the huge field and said they should turn it into a farm. Isagi and Mercia put their heads together again, and even though they missed the obvious answer at first, it's totally fine because they finally caught on. The three of them sat at a table right in the middle of a massive, never-ending field, and Isagi realized that leveling up an entire farm actually sounded like a pretty sweet deal. This lets him set up his own trade network and even start growing his own unique plants. Isagi's already picturing his massive farm overflowing with crops to sell, while Kanya is hyped for his company, wonderful, to ship them out to the whole world. Isagi and Kona's energy was so hungry for cash that it actually forced Mercia to back off. She can already tell they've got a mountain of work ahead, so Kanya reaches out her hand and wishes his massive farm total success. From here on out, this guy is actually hyped to team up with the trading company. Mercia was just glad that things turned out the way they did. Now, they'll have even more chances to. Now, our guy was stuck wondering what to do with all his staff. He thought about bringing in some extra help from the trading company. That's a genius move. It would definitely make things way wide. Realizing his plan was a total fail, he decides to hit up the village for workers first, figuring he'll only look outside if he can't find enough people there. Suddenly, a girl walks over and hands the guy a drink. Isagi asks if the villagers will show up for the job like usual, but he's actually super nervous because he has no idea if this is even going to work. Since the village has tons of food now, he's worried nobody will want to work on his farm since they can already feed themselves. She's 100% sure that nobody can stay hidden forever. The whole town is super thankful for him because he's always helping everyone out and teaching them all sorts of cool stuff. Isagi wants his farm workers to feel like they're actually winning by being there. That's when the girl realizes her master is way more generous than she ever thought. He picks up the yacht. She finally catches on that her master is actually a super nice guy. She thinks she can make a killing by making new stuff the guy hasn't shared with the village yet, giving everyone a real reason to finally show up for job interviews. It'd be awesome to make special breeds that only grow in one specific place, and the locals would be totally hyped to have something all to themselves. The girl had the idea to start growing fruit like apples and bananas. Just a moment later, the girl with the glowing eyes suggested planting grapes, and it was super obvious she was dying to taste them. Isagi apologized and told them the grapes were still just a work in progress. She was totally crushed by the news, and that's when it finally clicked for him that she was actually obsessed with grapes. She totally ignored him and just said to hit her up when the grapes were actually better, while Isagi started scouting for the perfect spot to launch his business since they had a ton of work to. He's looking for 5 workers to join him, and even though he's not sure how much cash they'll make yet, he's starting with this small crew to test things out. She told him she was heading to her dad to get the okay to hire some workers, and then she took off. Isagi is seriously hoping that everything goes off without a single problem. Let's face it, trying to run a massive farm like that is a total grind. It's been 5 days since Isagi put up those recruitment flyers, and he was just chilling with a book when Mercier came sprinting into the room totally out of breath to drop some huge news. Isagi asked if anyone hit them back about the recruitment, and the girl was totally stunned. Turns out a ton of people applied, and they ended up with 10 times more workers than they actually needed. A massive crowd swarmed the guy's house hoping to get a job on the farm, and honestly, no one expected this many people to actually show up for an interview. A massive crowd was already swarming the front of the house. These guys were totally caught off guard by the massive crowd of people trying to get a job. The very first candidate was actually a friend that both Isagi and Mercia knew. Turns out Naya applied too, and she thinks the whole situation is hilarious, especially since nobody's going to turn down a fat paycheck for a job this cool. Naya looked around and realized there were a ton of candidates. Isagi really wants to hire every single person there, but he's forced to do interviews to narrow the group down. Isagi's eyes snapped right over to ear Nia. She looked super adorable, just like a tiny kitten. She asked him straight up if they were actually friends. She was basically begging for a job on the farm without saying. Suddenly, Mercia appeared right behind the girl with a look that spelled total trouble. And with just one scary stare, she shut the candidate down so fast it made things feel super awkward. She told her that everyone has to follow the rules, shoved her out of the way, and ordered her to get in line. He heard the girls going at it and felt totally awkward listening to all their drama. Isagi was totally blown away by how many people showed up to help on his farm, and since he never expected this many volunteers, he was hyped that he could finally build his dream team. It was finally time for the interview to kick off, so Isagi apologized for the wait and got straight to business. Yin Mercy had a ton of work to do because they had to check out every single person applying for the job. Isagi locked in and listened to every single person applying, catching even the tiniest details because he knew picking the perfect crew for his farm was a total game changer. The next day, a few of the guys were called back to the farm, and they were totally hyped because it meant they were the lucky ones who actually passed the test and got the job. 5 guys were hyped that they actually made the cut, while a ton of other people got rejected and went home with nothing. Naya was so hyped that she tackled Mercia with a massive hug, and even though Mercia wasn't exactly feeling the love, She didn't pull away and just stood there awkwardly next to him. Even though the guys probably already knew each other, Izagi made them do formal introductions because that's the first step to actually working together as a team. Naya introduced herself and mentioned she used to help her grandpa in the fields, which was a total win because having real experience is exactly what gets you the job. Izagi remembers how Naya totally crushed it in the fields last time. She's definitely someone you can count on when things get real. He knows she'll have the perfect advice ready if turns out Rhodes is actually the son of a beekeeper. He's totally confident that he's the strongest and toughest guy around. The catch is, he has zero experience when attacked. Nora spends her days helping out on her dad's massive farm and managing the money at her mom's store. She's definitely not as strong as the other workers, but Ricardo was a hunter who also put in serious work at the farm using Isagi's seeds, and he ended up planting way more than anyone else in the whole village. He actually knows his way around a farm, and it turns out Ragman has just as much experience as Ricardo. He was honestly wondering if the guy even wanted to hire him too. Ragnar is totally confused about how he got the job after he spent the whole banquet talking trash to Isagi. The dude told him that's the exact reason he wanted to hire him. Isagi figures Ragmund won't feel awkward at all about hitting him up with some questions. Now, the guy finally figures out exactly what's going on. He asks to question Isagi face to face since it's his duty, and the others actually respected him for being so blunt. Mercia grabbed all the tools like rakes and hoses to get things moving. Now she's telling the workers it's finally time to start the harvest. Naya asks what exactly she starts reading out the list of all the veggies they need to harvest today. It's got everything from tomatoes and cucumbers to eggplants, bell peppers, and Chinese cabbage. But for real, she didn't even get to finish the list before Naya cut her off, asking if that was way too much to get done in just one day. She told them that's exactly why she needed those workers to help them out. Mershechka reminds them that even though the work is brutal, the pay is actually insane. Plus, Sianisagi is totally fine with them taking some of the harvest home, making this a... Mercia puts her hand on Nia's shoulder and flashes a grin. It looked like she was just cheering them on to do their best. But that smile basically told the workers they didn't. The workers were totally spooked by her intense aura and scrambled back to their jobs, realizing they better follow every single rule if they wanted to stay safe. Mercy walks up to Isagi and tells him to just focus on the workshop while she handles the rest. And since he totally respects her, he has no choice but to listen. This is where the boys finally started putting in work out in the fields. Everyone jumped right into their new jobs while Mercia gave them a full breakdown on how to handle all their new gear. Everyone was totally locked in while she explained everything. They were super into it and loved picking up these new skills. Mercy gave Ragmont a full breakdown on how to use a knife and pick the cabbage. Naya was just heading to work when she spotted a tree totally loaded with apples. Her eyes totally lit up, but she felt way too awkward to grab an apple with Mercio standing right there, especially since they'd get their own food after work anyway. The crew is grinding hard and some are definitely feeling the burn, but the guys with insane strength and stamina are just breezing through it like it's nothing. While the other guys were grinding in the fields, Isagi stayed back in the workshop to check on the harvest. He noticed the fruit wasn't quite ready yet and definitely needed more time to ripen. The strawberries, apples, and bananas were a total hit. But to run a massive farm, they need way more types of fruit so they can actually survive the weather and stay alive. If they keep going at this rate, they're going to need a way bigger workshop. Right as he was lost in his own head, he spotted Mercia working hard out in the field. Isagi realizes this girl is a total lifesaver, helping him handle everything from chores and shop projects to the heavy lifting on the farm. This girl is seriously always pushing herself way too hard. Isagi suddenly remembered the girl asking about grapes, and how she got so hyped talking about them that she totally lost herself in a dream of big, sweet fruit. Isagi knows growing grapes takes forever, but he's diving in anyway because he's totally locked in on finishing his mission to create these epic new fruits and veggies. Isagi pushes himself way too hard and ends up wrecking his back. It looks like the work is finally done, with massive stacks of notes scattered all over the workshop in a total mess. He knows that any second now, everyone is going to wake up. Isagi sees the staff had a super rough first day, and now he's wondering how he can actually thank them for all that hard work. Suddenly, a genius idea hits him out of nowhere. Isagi sprints to the cabinet, thinking he's still got a bit of time left to build a magic tool that'll make farm work way easier. Whenever he had a break at the castle, he spent his time sketching out designs for some epic magic gear. His notes are just messy sketches, but if he puts them all together, he'll build something that's going to help every single worker out there. They're totally out of supplies, so building this stuff is impossible. And since some notes are just rough sketches, It's going to be a nightmare to actually make them work. Isagi stops taking notes and is totally shocked to find a sketch of a tool that's the secret key to building his new device. All the work out in the fields just completely ground to a halt. Naya stretched her arms out, looking totally drained from her shift. You didn't need words to see she was exhausted, and the guys finally realized just how much of a brutal grind. The guys all piled into the room, so wiped out they could barely get a word out. They were all just crashing after a long day of grinding in the fields. Mercy checks them out and tells they Ragman was totally spent, and Ricard admitted he'd worked way harder here than on his own farm, because even though nobody expected this insane grind, they all felt just how brutal it really was. Rhodes was totally drained, but he was hyped that the squad scored so many veggies since they were getting paid well, and even got to keep some of the fruit. Ragnit looked over at Nora and realized she wasn't even breaking a sweat, but then she just looked down and let out a long sigh. She was totally exhausted and said she was basically running on nothing but pure girl power. The guy was totally confused and had no clue what she meant. With her very last breath, Nora told him she went through this every single day. She tried to laugh, but it sounded completely. He walks in, thanks the crew for their hard work, and tells them to take a seat because he's got something big to show them. So everyone sits down and listens closely, totally hooked. Usagi pulls out a mysterious object hidden under a cloth and tells his crew it's a special gift, feeling super hyped that he can finally make their long workdays a bit more exciting. Everyone's jaws dropped as they leaned in to get a closer look at the mystery object. Isagi whips off the cloth to reveal his first test mixer, looking totally hyped to show the guys exactly how his new invention works. The crew had no clue what this weird object was even for, but Isagi told them it was a magic tool that would blow their minds and totally change how they saw fruits and veggies forever. He explains that the base holds a neutral magic shard that spins the blade when you pump it with mana, but the workers are totally lost and think he's speaking gibberish. Mercia brings over a board of chopped fruit and tosses it right into the mixer. He pours in some water and hits it with magic to fire up the device and grab that one item. The mixers started roaring like crazy, totally crushing all the vegetables inside. Naya was totally shocked they'd waste good food like that, and she honestly felt like treating veggies this way was just plain wrong. Wait, how did this dude not hear her screaming at the top of her lungs? Isagi told me to chill and just look at the final result, which left the workers completely stunned by what he'd pulled off. He handed the guys the fresh apple juice with his hands still soaking wet. The workers were totally blown away that Isagi made apple juice with just 2 ingredients, and they legit thought he was using some kind of magic. The guy asks who wants a drink, and every kid shoots their hand up, totally desperate to get a taste of that juice. They were totally wiped out from working on the farm, but now they finally got to try a brand new drink that looked super refreshing. Everyone was totally obsessed with how good the drink tasted. They immediately started seeing these super shiny, dripping apples in their minds. Those sun-soaked fruits made the kids feel all warm and cozy inside. NEA, Rhodes, and Ricardo were totally blown away that they made such a sweet, amazing drink using nothing but basic apples and water. Isaki gave the guys a wink, feeling super hyped that they were actually into the drink. Out of nowhere, Nora and Ragman pop up behind the guy with the empty glasses because they're dying to try that amazing drink too. Isagi told the two to hold up while he finished knocking out the dishes. He swapped the water for milk to make it go down easier, but changing the recipe like that gave the whole thing a super weird taste. So Isagi's gonna whip up some banana and strawberry milk. These drinks are totally insane and unlike anything anyone's ever seen, so Nora and Ragman dive right in to give them a taste. The sweet strawberry flavor rushed through Nora's body, making her so happy she felt like she was literally about to fly away. The boy's exhaustion vanished like magic, and Ragman could feel the power surging through him as he finished his drink. Naya actually admitted that she's never tasted juice this amazing in her whole life. Ricardo was so pumped from that juice he felt ready to throw down tomorrow. He was already planning to bring in an even bigger haul next time. All the workers were totally convinced that this was He was super hyped that the kids loved the juice, and he knew all his hard work finally paid off. Naya thinks that banana milk looks amazing and wants a taste, so Isagi agrees, but he's got to go wash the bottle one more time. Mercy just smiles as she listens to every single word they say. She's stoked that Isagi clicked with the guys so fast. Mercia totally expected this from such a class act. But honestly, Isagi had no clue what they were even talking about. Mercy caught on to his scheme to get the workers addicted to that delicious fruit so they could never leave. And she realized this guy was a total pro at using rewards to keep everyone in line. This soggy guy didn't even hesitate for a second. It'd be awesome if these kids could actually have a little fun while working on the farm. Mercia was totally down with the plan, since she and her master were on the exact same wavelength. Out of nowhere, Asagi just hands a drink over to Mercy. He figured she was totally wiped out too and hadn't even tasted the drinks yet. He grabbed a glass and told them they should taste it together before sharing it with anyone else. Isagi whipped up a totally new drink, showing his creativity is basically limitless, and Mercius just gave a soft smile. They clinked their glasses and downed every last drop to celebrate making it through such a brutal day. It's a super sunny day, and Mercia asks Isagi to go handle the farm work like usual, which he's totally cool with since she's always got his back. It's been 6 weeks since the crew started grinding on the farm. With 5 guys working in Mercia, the place is finally running at 100% all that hard. Their farm was getting huge, packed with regular fields, healing herbs, wheat, and fruit trees that they absolutely needed to keep the whole place running. This company has officially become a total beast, and the sheer amount of land and farms they own is enough to blow anyone's mind. Isagi realizes this thing is so massive that there's just no way to go around it anymore. But right then, a crazy idea popped into his head. He told her to hang on for a second because he needed just a moment to make his big idea a reality. The guy explains his big brain move. He used pure copper to build a mechanical horse that looked and acted just like a real animal. Turns out this horse is actually a golem, and it's the perfect ride for scouting huge areas without wasting any time or energy. She gave him a massive thank you for all his help, and Isaki decides to make a second horse so they can finally ride together. But it turns out they were totally out of parts to build a second horse. They had to double up on a single horse just to finish their rounds. Mercier was totally shocked by the news, especially since the girl was acting super awkward and wouldn't even hold on to the guy while they were riding. Isaiji told them to hold on tight because riding with no hands is super dangerous. Mercia's face turned bright red as she grabbed his jacket, totally loving how close she was to him. He whips around when he hears someone purring right behind him and asks the girl if she's the one making that noise. Mercia just looked away and told him he was seeing things. Then she leaned her head right on Asagi's shoulder. SIE was left wondering what that noise actually sounded like. Riding that copper horse was way better since it's super fast and saves the guys a ton of time compared to just walking everywhere. Isagi and Marcia finally pull up to Rhodes, and Isagi gets straight to work on the site alongside the golems. He was totally caught off guard seeing the boys, but just gave them a quick hello since Rhodes is a total pro who always gets the job done right. The guy told them he was just there to check the farm and settle some business, telling everyone to stay cool, so Rhodes backed off while the dude walked straight up to one of the greenhouses. He notices Promino House stays at the perfect temperature because it's wrapped in a clear film and uses magic gear to keep things comfy. He figures it's way better to slow down the growth, because letting his crops grow at the perfect speed is the real secret to getting the best results. He's checking every single bush and sizing up the fruit to make sure it's perfect. Mercia finally realizes that this dude is actually a total legend. Asagi didn't hear a thing, and when he tried to ask her about it, she just claimed she hadn't said anything and turned away. Looking out the window, she realizes that building a farm this massive is a huge deal, proving her master is a total legend and a true inspiration to everyone. After Sagi finished checking everything, he told them they had to hit the orchard to scout every field and make sure no weird problems were messing with the crops before it was too late. Out of nowhere, Naya sprints over to Asagi. She yells that something's going down at the orchard. She's gasping for air and can barely get the words out. Just looking. Instead of explaining, the girl just led them away, which was honestly the best move since every second counted and this news couldn't wait. The guys finally made it to the orchard, but it was a total disaster zone with smashed fruit everywhere, watermelon skins tossed all over the dirt, and sticky insides splattered across the entire field. Isagi and Mercia were totally freaked out by the terrifying sight in front of them. Everyone was completely baffled because something this crazy is so rare, you could count the times it's happened on just one hand. It looked like a total hurricane had ripped through the field and smashed all the fruit to pieces. But this definitely wasn't some natural disaster. Isagi asks Nei if this same thing happened yesterday, but she shakes her head and says everything was totally normal. The sky is still super clear with no sign of rain or a storm, and it's actually been a really long time since anything like this went down. She said everything seemed totally normal when she finished her shift. But once morning hit, the whole situation turned into a total nightmare. Naya could barely stop herself from crying right then and there. It killed. The boy asked if there was any more nasty fruit, but the girl said no, explaining it only rots in this one spot, which was bad news for Naya since she was the one in charge of the watermelon field. The kid let out a massive sigh of relief, realizing he got super lucky that only the watermelons were ruined, because if the other fields were hit, the whole farm would have been totally wrecked for a long time. Naya balled her hands into tight fists right in front of her, She's shaking and crying while begging him to forgive her, totally shocked by the disaster in the fields and feeling like it's all her fault for not watching the harvest. You could tell she was totally stressing out about the harvest. Mercier tries to chill her out by saying it's not her fault, and Isagi totally agrees since nobody can actually watch the fields in the middle of the night. Isagi started by grabbing all the broken gear, and the girls were totally down to help him out. Isagi stares at crates full of rotten fruit and buzzing bugs, wondering how things could have gotten this gross. Wait, he just spotted some huge claw marks right on the fruit. Just past the field, he spots some wild animal tracks that might finally explain why the entire harvest was totally trashed. It's clear now that no human did this, and once Mercy catches the scent of a wild animal, the boys finally realize exactly who the killer is. Out of nowhere, Naya grabs their attention and calls them over to see proof that the guy was totally right about the wild animals being the ones to blame. Turns out, the girl actually stumbled across a clump of black wool. The guy thinks they're dealing with a black wolf. These beasts are super strong and cause nothing but trouble. They're totally wild and hunt down everything they eat. Nayu was blown away that he figured it all out just by touching some wool. He claimed he's an expert at reading the stats of any material he finds. Right then, Aya's totally freaked out. They'll show up again today. Wait, looking at the input again. Mercia assumed that the wild animals on the watermelon pane were attracted by. Mercy warned them that this was 100% going to happen again. She compared it to a bear that's tasted blood. Once it gets a bite, it's. Naya's totally freaking out now and has no clue what to do, because fighting wild beasts is a death wish, but giving away the food for free would totally ruin the farm and leave all the workers with nothing. This monster is super fast and hits like a truck, so fighting him out in the open farm is a total death trap. The guy suggests putting on the show right in the middle of the field where all the watermelons got wrecked. The kid tells NEA to get Ragment and Ricardo to guard the farm, but he makes it clear they shouldn't throw their lives away for it. She did exactly what she was told and bolted away as fast as her legs could carry her. He told the golems to drop everything and guard the farm, because he and Mercia needed a solid plan to save their entire future. He hopped on his horse, ready to track those wild animals deep into the forest. Mercy leaps onto her horse and insists on following the master, knowing Isagi might need backup at any second. He tells her he's about to speed up, so she better hold on tight. Mercia was totally down, and they were both dead set on figuring out why all the fruit in the watermelon field had suddenly gone bad. Deep in the woods, the boy asks the girl if these tracks match the ones from the watermelon field to see if his hunch about the farm was actually right. The girl backed it up, saying the tracks led deep into the woods and still smelled like beasts, proving that wild animals were definitely the ones who wrecked the harvest. Out of nowhere, Mercia looks over and sees a massive pack of wild animals sprinting right alongside them. Suddenly, they were so close that the boys were totally shocked to see them walking right next to each other. Suddenly, the guys were totally surrounded by a pack of wild beasts. Turns out these monsters are actually shadow wolves, and the guy was totally right after he checked that scrap of wool a worker found in the field. Isagi's kicking himself for not bringing his squad, because he totally underestimated how much stronger these wild beasts are compared to humans. The kid asks Mercier if she's actually got what it takes to handle that shadow wolf, but she's not even totally sure about that yet. Still, she's acting like she's got this under control. She's 100% ready to fight for. Isagi realizes this enemy is a total beast, and even Mercia might lose, so he knows he has to jump in to win. But the Black Wolves are definitely going to stop it. He slowly slides his hand out of the glove, being super careful. Mercia jumps right in front of the guy and tells him she'll buy some time while he makes a run for it, showing she's got some serious guts. Isagi was completely blown away that Mercia would actually risk being left all alone in a forest full of wild animals. He looked absolutely furious, and shouted that there was no way he was just going to ditch her and run. He knows it makes zero sense, but as the only guy there, he's not about to ditch Mercy. Isagi feels like he's totally out of line, so he grabs her shoulders and reminds her that she stayed by his side even after he got kicked out of the Imperial castle. Isagi tells her that even if things get crazy again, he's not going anywhere, because he knows they're way more powerful when they stick together through the danger. Hearing those words really got to Mercia. But that sweet moment got totally wrecked when the wolf started laughing like a total creep. The boys whipped their heads around to find where the noise was coming from. They had no idea where the beast. One shadow wolf thought these humans were total fools for wasting their precious time on a dumb argument instead of fighting for their lives. The boy realized this wolf was a total genius who could actually talk and understand them, which was crazy but totally expected for a magical beast. Isagi figured the wolf was probably just messing with them, and since it wasn't attacking yet, He realized he could still talk his way out of this with a plan that didn't involve any. Isagi screams that he wants to cut a deal with the wolf. Mercio is totally blown away by the crazy idea. The girl never thought her master would risk his life to talk to the wolf. Even the wolf was stunned and asked if he was seriously trying to make a deal with monsters. Nobody had ever been gutsy enough to even try that before. But then, this insanely brave guy actually stepped. The guy promises this will be quick and make them both rich, so the wolf hops down, totally into the idea, and lets him start his pitch. He leans in close, getting his mouth right in the guy's face. He warns Isagi in a super creepy voice that if he gets bored, he'll have to crush him. And even though it's terrifying, there's just no way to back down now. This dude squeezed that glove even harder, holding on with everything he had. He asks the wolf if they're the ones who raided his watermelon patch last night. Now the wolf finally knows what those tasty fruits are called, and he's already planning to head back down for heat. The guy warned that if the wolf keeps eating those watermelons, they're totally gonna run out. If that happens, the wolf will just go find more. Totally sure he can find fresh fruit and berries to replace them. The guy threw his hands up and dropped a bombshell. Only they know the secret to growing these watermelons, leaving every wolf there, especially the leader, completely stunned. The wolf totally lost it and demanded to know what Asagi's deal was, thinking the kid wanted them to leave if the watermelons vanished, and he was super on edge about losing his. The guy straight up tells them that's a total lie. He's hooking the wolves up with watermelons and fresh crops, but he's definitely expecting a big favor in return. These wolves were clearly obsessed with the watermelons, staying super chill and listening to every single rule the guy threw at them. In exchange, Asagi tells the wolves they've got to be the new bodyguards for his farm. The wolf totally lost it and started screaming that the kid was trying to treat them like basic guard dogs. He never expected someone to disrespect him and his pack like that. There was no way he. Wolf dropped into a low stance, looking like he was ready to pounce at any second. Mercy was seriously stressing out because things were falling apart, and she knew one tiny mistake meant they'd never see their village farm again. Isagi explains that it all really depends on how the wolf sees the situation. He explains that to a wolf, they're basically just farm animals that keep serving up delicious snacks. The guy's logic was totally solid based on what the wolf said, and even the wolf was blown away by how smart they were. He told them his farm was packed with way more than just watermelons, and since the wolves were finally chill, they were totally vibing with the deal. The kid asks the wolf what he decided. Those beasts were totally fired up, and they just wanted a home where they'd never go hungry again. Night rolled in and everything went pitch black. The farm is finally ready for a total showdown, and the guys are standing at the edge with weapons and cleaning gear, looking completely ready to fight for their home. Out of nowhere, Nia spots a tiny glow way off in the distance. The guys realized Mercy and Isagi was finally back, and they were just hyped everyone was safe after being gone for so long. The kid begged them to forgive him for being so late. Their golem's horse totally died on them, so they had to leave it behind and keep going. Somehow, they still made it to. Naya was freaking out thinking the boys were actually getting hurt. He said that luckily everything worked out, and everyone was just hyped that the whole squad was safe, though they were still low-key panicking about Isagi and Mercy. She's wondering if the guys actually managed to tame those black wolves. The guy hesitated and told him to just stay chill and listen, but before he could even start, someone else jumped in and asked if they could go out. He told the guy to shut up right as he was about to explain the plan, and it was super hype because seeing a regular person team up with a wild beast is something most people just don't get. Suddenly, a creepy black rift opened up right next to the guy's boot. Just seconds later, a massive shadow wolf head popped out of nowhere, and the guys left guarding the farm were absolutely losing it because nobody thought the monster would get this close to them. The kid shouted that a monster was hiding right in Isagi's shadow. Isagi held out his hand and told the boys to chill, because they needed to actually listen to the guy and understand what was going on so they wouldn't be so freaked out by the guests. Deep in the forest, a wolf actually walks up to this guy and offers him a deal. The wolf warned that if Isagi couldn't satisfy its hunger, the deal was dead right then and there, but he still said yes. This dude is 100% sure his farm is the best around, whether it's how much he grows or how amazing it tastes. The wolf was loving that confidence, knowing his pack finally had a non-stop supply of food. Ragnant was totally shocked to find such a powerhouse just hanging out near the village. Ricardo thought it was super cool that the kid actually offered a deal to such a terrifying monster. Let's be, Isaki's finally relieved that the attacks are over, and since the crew is totally on board, he can get back to work knowing this is the only way to keep the farm and everyone safe. Suddenly, a voice calls out from the guy's shadow, asking if it's finally time to come out. Asagi gives the word, and in a flash, a shadow monster crawls right out of the darkness. The beast gives its body a wild shake, sending fur flying everywhere. He immediately asks to go over the rules again, which is a big deal because he's doing it right in front of the whole crew, so everyone knows exactly what's going down. Asagi tells the wolves their job is to guard the farm at night, and the wolf is totally down as long as he gets paid in fruits and veggies, but they still have a few more rules to settle. He was looking at the massive pile of food and thinking about how much they actually harvested. Mercia steps up and says she's got this, totally sure she can talk the wolf into the deal with just a few quick words. The girl promised to keep the village guards stuffed every single day, and every 5 days, she'd bring enough food for the whole pack to have a massive feast. The wolf thought it was a total steal and agreed, but he was pretty shocked that humans had gotten so good at farming they could hand over a massive feast every 5 days. So the guy starts laying down the law and explaining the ground rules. The wolf was totally shocked because he didn't expect extra rules on top of his chores. The guy explained that they needed this. The wolf actually sits and listens as the guy lays down the law. No attacking people, no breaking stuff, no touching the crops, and he even has to protect the workers from other monsters. The wolf slammed his paw down and shut the kid up instantly. He says their only job is guarding the farm, and he doesn't care about anyone else. But this wolf's mood flips like a switch, just like a wild animal. Asagi explains that without workers, the crops are toast. So he tells the wolf to see them as part of the farm, so it has a solid reason to keep them safe. The wolf admits the kid actually has a point. But he can't promise to keep everyone safe. He's a powerful beast, but he's definitely not a god. Even being fast and yes. But honestly, this is all Asagi needs to make his move. The wolf let out a nasty hiss, looking totally ticked off. He leaned down to fill his pack in on the plan, ordering everyone to come out and go over the deal one last time before they finally got to work. Suddenly, a bunch of other wolves literally crawled right out of the alpha's shadow, sat down in front of him to hear his command, and every single one of them was totally down with the plan. The wolf laid down the law, telling him he had to follow the rules and do his duty. He realized that warping through shadows was actually a super broken ability. It was fast, easy, and basically, Mercier is planning to head back to the village to explain the whole situation to her dad and the neighbors. The boy was actually super polite when he asked her for help, so now she just needs to... This wolf's secret code name is Sag. He asked if the wolves were finally getting their watermelons since they were heading to the village, and honestly, it made total sense based on the deal they made. He actually agreed and told the wolves he'd take them to the watermelon patch right this second. Isagi was super picky with the watermelons, making sure every single one he grabbed was perfectly sweet. He told them to hold on for just a second before they sliced that fruit open. Ever since the wolves started guarding the farm, things have been totally peaceful. The villagers don't have to stress about their crops getting trashed, and the wolves finally have a guaranteed meal every single day. Nearly 30 black wolves joined the guard to make up for all the mess those deer and boars caused. And while the cubs were busy playing all over the farm, Mercia just smiled and told. Mercia and the wolf leader strolled through the city as Kokoro watched the pack totally soak up the head pats from the people. The wolf boss was completely confused, wondering how these fierce, scary hunters turned. The wolf thinks demons are totally chill with nature and just wants humans to leave them alone. But Mercy just smirks because she thinks his whole idea of living in peace is a total joke. With the wolf helping out, Asagi finally has way more time for his research. He can totally dive into his science and focus on breeding all kinds of crazy new fruits and veggies. Best of all, he headed down to the basement, clutching a notebook in his hands. Turns out, the basement was actually just a massive storage room. It was packed with all sorts of dried herbs, fresh greens, and even chunks of ore. It looks like they kept everything here. Isagi was determined to make his harvest better than ever. To make it happen, he built a secret experimental farm deep underground. Right now, his top priority is grabbing as much data as possible. Isagi uses a magic tool to trap sunlight for his underground farm, so he never has to worry about lighting up his lab. These unfinished crops can grow in some seriously weird ways down in that secret underground farm where they're running all kinds of experiments. The okra was a total mess and the broccoli literally sucked the life out of the dirt, so he realized these crops just weren't ready for his farm yet. Isagi is about to take things to a whole new level. He calls Mercia just to double-check that she's nowhere nearby. He definitely doesn't want her finding out what The second he touched the wall with his poem, the whole thing just started to melt away. Massive bunches of grapes with carved leaves hung from the ceiling, and every single berry glowed like a shiny pearl under the lights. Those grapes looked so delicious, they literally looked like a perfect painting. This dude was dying to know what it actually tasted like. Their batch tasted super sour because you can't just grow the perfect crop overnight, and since it usually takes weeks, the seeds were all different sizes and a total nightmare to eat. Isagi realized it was a total nightmare to balance high yield with great flavor, so he was actually ready to ditch mass production for good. But then Isagi remembers how hyped Mercia looked when they talked about grapes, and he realizes he can't give up now because he needs to keep going just to thank her for everything she's done. He knows Mercia has done way too much for them, so he's got to pay her back with the tastiest grapes ever. And he's totally sure this group can make his plan happen exactly. Out of nowhere, Isagi hears someone's voice coming from inside the lab. He bolted out in a flash and the wall behind him instantly went back to looking totally normal. Isagi peeks from behind the plants and spots Mercia, who's 100% sure that guy is hiding out in the basement. She basically has a radar for him and knows. Mercy gave Isagi a dirty look and told him he was overworking, since she realized he'd been grinding away in that workshop for 2 weeks straight. Turns out, this dude has no clue how fast time is actually zooming by. Mercia let out a long sigh, her eyes filling with nothing but pity. She warned him that if he kept pushing this hard, he was totally going to end up sick. Isagi was actually thinking about just taking a day off for once. But the guy is totally clueless about what to do on his days off, and since he hasn't rested in forever, he's going to need someone to step in and show him how to actually relax. Mercia just kept heading out for her picnic. The weather was awesome, and she knew this super pretty flower garden nearby where she could just vibe. Plus, she was always smart enough to pick the perfect. He was totally down for that and told them to start cooking right now so they'd have enough time for their picnic today. Turns out Mercier was already totally ready and showed the guy a basket full of food. Isagi thought this was awesome and wanted to invite the rest of the crew, but Mercy already beat him to it, so they're all showing up as soon as they finish their shifts. He thanks her for making sure their timing was totally on point. The second he steps outside and shuts the door, that creepy shadow face crawls right out of his own shadow. He's always popping up out of nowhere and scaring the life out of anyone. The kid couldn't believe the wolf had snuck right into his shadow, and being that close to the beast finally terrified him, especially when the wolf claimed that as a farm worker, he wanted. The boy was totally shocked that even Gakuro the wolf wanted to join the picnic. Gakuro just looked away, acting like it was no big deal. It was obvious he really wanted to. The sun is absolutely beaming down outside. Mercia, Isagi, and Kokuro headed out for a chill picnic. They trekked through the city, the woods, and the fields until they finally hit this massive flower garden. Looking back, he stepped into the garden and his jaw literally dropped at how insane the view was. Huge fields of flowers stretched out everywhere, looking totally perfect. A single tree stood there, raining down flower. The girl spoke up and told them they'd finally arrived. There were way too many types of flowers to even count, and our guy had absolutely no idea this stunning garden was sitting right outside his village with a massive sea of flowers making the whole place. Isaki started checking out the flowers really closely. The girl just watched him quietly, keeping a close eye on him. She was honestly just happy he finally got a break to relax and enjoy. He had no clue that a garden this beautiful was hidden right outside his village. The guy was curious about the flowers, and since Mercia literally knew every single plant in the garden, she proudly told him all their names. Isagi was actually pretty impressed she knew so many flowers, especially since he only understood the science behind them. But even with the perfect weather and the chill vibes, he just couldn't bring himself. He asked Mercia if he could grab some flowers, and she said sure, but it was super weird because no one knew why he needed them right then. He uses his magic and those petals instantly swap to a totally different color. Mercia noticed the Hansanya petals suddenly turned blue, even though they were just pure white a second ago. This dude explains that he used alchemy to totally change the elements inside the flower. He hands the modified flower over to the girl as a gift, and now it's totally clear why he needed to snag it from the garden earlier. Mercia was totally caught off guard by the gift and started blushing like crazy. The boys just stood there awkwardly holding the flowers out for what felt like forever. The wolf didn't even need. Suddenly, everything finally clicked for this dude. He apologized, feeling like a total idiot for randomly giving Mercy that flower because it was a reckless move and definitely not how he wanted to show her any kindness. Isagi lowers the flower, feeling like a total pest because Mercia does so much for him that she never gets any time for herself. Mercy suddenly snatches the flower from Asagi's hands and tells him he's not annoying her at all, because she's actually super hyped to get a surprise gift and just loves the whole vibe. She has no idea he's actually in the loop, and Mercia is totally shocked because giving a handmade gift to a guy is a huge deal, even though he's completely clueless about what it really means. He straight up asked what that gesture was even supposed to mean. She just turned away with a soft smile and told him it was a secret, putting her finger to her lips to show she wasn't telling. Isagi gets a bit freaked out and asks for the flower back, but Mercy totally shuts him down, claiming it's hers now since he was the one who gave it to her. She turned away and got totally lost in the flower's amazing scent. This super sweet moment got totally wrecked when the wolf finally woke up, and since Kokoro was starving, he demanded they start eating because they'd been chilling in the garden forever, and the table was still empty. The guys spread out a blanket right under the tree. Mercia popped open the basket to show off the sandwiches, doing her absolute best to make sure Isagi didn't stress for even a second about their picnic. Asagi and Kokoro took one look inside that basket and their jaws completely dropped. The basket is stuffed with tons of different sandwiches, and the wolf is so hungry he demands his share right this second. The guy just grinned and told him he'd slice off a piece for him right that second. The sandwich was sliced right down the middle, showing off every single layer stacked inside. The guys totally smashed those fire sandwiches like they hadn't eaten in years. That thick, juicy ham and crunchy lettuce paired with fruit-sweet tomatoes and a tangy kick tasted absolutely legendary. This dude was totally blown away by how insane the veggies from their farm tasted. Mercia realized the guy's special veggies tasted insane, and it's obvious that all these clues are finally adding up. Isagi stared down that Marcia sandwich, thinking the thick tomatoes and cabbage looked absolutely fire, but Kokoro didn't care one bit about the combo. The wolf asks if they have any watermelon sandwiches, but Isagi is totally confused because he thinks you should just eat the fruit plain. Isagi's looking at this and thinking, man, what a weird combo. Believe it or not, they've even got watermelon sandwiches, and Marcia actually put in the work to make them. The guys were snacking on sweet watermelon and yogurt sandwiches, plus they had that classic salted watermelon and cheese salad too. Believe it or not, it actually sounded super delicious. Mercia asks Mr. Asagi if he wants to try some sandwiches, and he's totally down for it, while the wolf is already busy devouring treats and his favorite watermelon. He takes a bite and is shocked by how well the sweet watermelon and tangy yogurt vibe together, finally realizing that watermelon in a sandwich is actually a total game changer. Asagi's never really liked those super sugary treats from the capital, but this watermelon sandwich is actually fire with its sweet and salty vibe. Mercy's hard work definitely didn't go. The kid thanked Mercia for the awesome food, while the wolf was already passed out and licking his lips after that big meal. Kukro realized the only reason it tasted so good was because of the watermelon. Isagi says only Mercia can make watermelon taste this epic, and he's totally convinced there's no better combo out there. She was totally hyped to hear those words. He started chowing down on his second classic sandwich while she just watched him with a big smile. The boys were just chilling under a tree without a care in the world, totally loving the peace and quiet. Suddenly, a girl waves from the field and shouts that everyone's already eating, since the rest of the crew finished Marcia's chores and rushed off to rest. It turns out it was Naya and the whole squad, and since they were all starving after work, they crashed Isagi and Mercia's spot just to get a taste of those sandwiches Mercia made. The kid was so relieved the guys were finally done with all their chores, but Mercia wasn't happy about it one bit. She thought they should have been given way more work to do. He asks her what she's even talking about, but she just flashes a grin, says everything's totally fine, and tells them they should all spread out. The whole crew joined the vacationers, and they were all super stoked to finally get a day off together. Kanya greets everyone with a big smile, and since she's from this awesome Chamber of Commerce, everyone is hyped to say good morning right back. She's super chill with all. Isagi saw the girl buying the harvest just like she always does. Koni said he was right and gave the kid a quick thanks. The boy pointed over and told them that all of this was there. Kanye's eyes went wide when she saw a massive pile of crates and barrels full of loot. She was totally hyped and thanked Asagi for the hookup. Now she's got weight yet. Kanya gave the signal, and her crew started packing those carts until they were stuffed to the absolute brim. Out of nowhere, the girl's expression totally flipped, and Isagi caught it immediately, asking her what was going on. Ponya found out from Mercia's letter that the guards were actually demons, and after the guy confirmed it, Isagi explained they were shadow and black wolves, so when he offered to call, Isagi waved one of the shadow wolves over to come closer. Kanya was hyped to see such a cute creature, but you gotta remember that wild animals are totally unpredictable. Kanya asked if she could pet one. The moment she reached for the wolf's head, her hat just blasted right off. With the hat clamped in his teeth, the wolf suddenly leaped away from the girl and looked back at her like he just found a brand new toy he wasn't planning on sharing. She clutched her head in a panic since that was her absolute favorite hat. She charged at the wolf like a total blur, screaming for him to give it back. The wolf was caught, The girl couldn't reach the wolf in time and face planted into the dirt, and when she later asked where it vanished, a voice from the guy's shadow told her that catching that wolf wouldn't be so easy. Gokuro pops out of the kid's shadow and says sorry to the girl while holding her hat in his teeth. But then Kanye suddenly leaps onto the wolf, yelling that she finally... Kokuro was totally frozen while Kanye kept screaming for the hat, so the wolf finally agreed to the deal as long as she'd just stop yelling in his ear. Out of nowhere, Asagi asks to boost their trade by 50%, and Kanye thinks it's a total win. With all these carts clogging up the area, it's getting impossible to move. And the girl realizes he's got way too much food because they've grown so many veggies that there's literally nowhere left to put them. She told them they should head into the city to sell off all their extra fruits and veggies. This was the first time the kid had ever heard about this. Konya told him there was a city called Melon just a day's walk away. Isagi realized this was the same. Melon is the closest town and it's super lively, so if the guys pay for a spot at the market, they can trade whatever they want. This lets Isagi finally sell her fruit. The girl is 100% sure that anything from Isagi's farm is going to sell like crazy. I mean, his stuff is always... Mercio was totally shocked because he was already planning to sell off his fruit stash, and the girl loved the idea since she was looking to buy stuff for the house anyway. Naya was dying to go to the city too and begged them to take her. Mercia asked her what she was even planning to do there. The truth was, she wanted the whole... He flashes a smile and asks her what the real reason is for her trip to the city. Naya explains that she's been working super hard lately. She just wanted to head into town. Isagi totally played her, realizing that even though she acted like she wanted to help him sell his harvest, that definitely wasn't her main plan. Mercy warned her this was strictly business and not a fun trip, but Nia didn't care because she was just desperate to finally leave that village behind. Both girls stared him down, waiting for his final answer, and as soon as he said Nate could come too, she bolted to go pack her bags. Mercia thinks Isagi should take the girl on the trip since they grew up together, but he shuts it down, saying they're going to be slammed with sales while Naya handles the customers. Marsha's totally down to help out, so Naya can rush off to meet the guys for their trip, rocking a cute crop top and shorts for the journey. Mercia did a double take because the girl looked completely different. Nia told her she was rocking this new outfit just to head into the city. She was super hyped and couldn't stop smiling. Naya asked Mercy why she wasn't wearing something cute for a change, but Mercy just said she's so swamped with work that she literally has zero time to get dressed up. Naya called the whole thing a total snooze and said she's dying to see Mercia in some cuter outfits, because even though she's a total knockout, she's just... Mercia told Isagi to hurry up so they could make it back before dark, and Isagi agreed, saying those golem horses would get them there in just 3 hours. Mercia instantly flashed back to their last golem horse ride and turned bright red, covering her face as she remembered exactly how close they were pressed together. Luckily, they found 3 horses so everyone had a ride, and Isagi used his materials to make them move way faster while Naya was super hyped to get her own golem too. It turns out the guy just got a fresh batch of supplies, including the copper they needed to build the golem. Isagi was super hyped that everything was falling into place so perfectly, but then Isdini's. Mercia kept a totally blank face as she hopped on her horse and told everyone to get moving. Asagi thought she just hated the way the horse looked. It was honestly super hard for him. The boys took off, galloping as fast as they could across the massive fields, and Naya was totally hyped that they let her come and even gave her a horse so she could finally taste the... Naya yelled that she finally spotted the city, and Isagi was totally hyped as they saw the rooftops peeking over those massive solid walls. The guys head through a massive archway with a huge crowd of people. Mercia pulls off a smooth jump from her horse to keep going on foot, and they end up walking for a really long... The guys headed into the city. The streets were totally packed with tons of people and all kinds of magical creatures. Naya was hyped and couldn't stop staring at everyone they passed. The boys headed toward the massive arches leading to the city center, passing tons of merchants who had flooded the place to sell their gear. Naya figured the guys were total newbies to the city, but Isagi reveals he's actually been to Milan before. He didn't get to see any cool sights last time, though. Naya was super hyped that the boys finally had time to chill and explore. And with Isagi totally on board, they could finally hit the city and get some serious trading done. But first, the guys have to sell their loot to make some quick cash. Neha really wanted to help Asagi and Mercia get the job done. But out of nowhere, Mercy froze the second she saw those insane jewels behind the glass. With every gem glowing in the sun, and the thin chains looking totally weightless and fancy. Isagi remembered how she was totally obsessed with that one thing. He asked Mercia if she actually liked it, but she immediately started acting like it wasn't true at all. Isagi totally gets what Mercia likes and can see right through her bad poker face, so he decides to hook her up with a gift after work because he's really hyped to pull off a... The guys finally hit the market and it was packed with tents full of loot, so he paid for a spot, pitched his own tent, and now they've got to get all their stuff ready to sell. Isagi was super proud of how he set up the shelves, but Naya wasn't feeling it at all and thought the produce needed to look way more beautiful. The girl thought the counter looked totally mid, but Mercia and Isagi were convinced their simple setup and delicious fruit were enough to show everyone how good they really were. Nia let out an annoyed sigh, wishing the boys realized the buyers had no clue how delicious their farm's food really was. So she tried to spell it out for them as clear. Mercia and Isagi were totally blown away. It was like a light bulb finally clicked in their heads. They seriously had no clue this was even possible until now. Then, NEA. The girl checked out all the crates of fruits and veggies. Naya suggested they sell fresh juice instead of just the fruit. Luckily, Isagi actually brought a blender with him. Nia wanted the food to look super cool, and since Mercia had all these awesome baskets from the village, they were perfect for making the meal look amazing. Naya starts grabbing a bunch of different fruits to mix them all together. Mercia and Isagi watch closely, totally curious to see what she's making. She packs the whole fruit mix into... The whole thing looked absolutely incredible. It was the perfect gift for anyone to take home. Naya felt super proud of her work as she waited for customers to show up. Our guy could